Prologue. Interstellar Space.
Battle stations initiated.
Belay that order, computer. Resnick turned away from the op station, her dark eyes scandalized that Captain Barrow would have the temerity to override an order given by the great General Titus. Truth is, I'm light years from being anything close to great. A fact that didn't diminish my desire to rip Barra a new one for countering my order. I slipped past Resnick's chair, getting right in Barra's face. "What's your problem, Barra?" The Ajax captain stood her ground. "My problem, General, is that you're ignoring first contact protocols." Langley, the ever-watchful reporter, i.e. nosy, kept her starburst blue eyes on the viewport but wasn't missing a single word. I gestured my thumb at the blackness of space beyond the command deck's viewport. "You're kidding me. There's no such thing as aliens." Barra's eyes narrowed. "Then who built the mechanoids?" I shrugged. "I'll leave that debate to the xenologists and philosophers. Right now, whatever that thing is out there poses a threat." Barra folded her arms, her blue eyes defiant. "You don't know that, General." She was right, of course, but given all that has happened to us over the past few days, I had no intention of taking any unnecessary chances. Nothing was going to stop me from getting back home to my family. Bad enough that I lost Carlos and Adrian. Dr. Salland, noting the tension in the air, joined us on the command deck. Her steps were quick and eager. "What's going on?" Resnick's fingers punched away at the ops console. "Some kind of giant spaceship or structure is in our path." Salland's narrow face lit up with excitement. "Really? Let me see the readings." She hurried over to ops, Resnick offering up her seat, exchanging it for the comm station on the far right of the cockpit. Salland's eyes lit up as she scanned the data. "Quantum properties. From the sphere and nearby. These readings? They're not like anything I've ever seen before." I wished I could see the damn thing. Magnification was useless since there wasn't any real light in interstellar space. This didn't feel right. Too much of a coincidence. "Has it seen us?" Langley spoke up before Resnick had a chance, her voice calm and composed. "We're in a stealth ship, Titus." I shot her a glance. "We don't know that thing's capabilities." Resnick's brow furrowed in concentration. "I think this thing has some stealth tech of its own, General. I can barely keep a signal lock." "Donna, think you can get this boat closer?" Langley slipped into the helm seat, her fingers deftly manipulating the controls. "Obviously I'm no pilot, but I might be able to coach the auto-nav system to take a little detour." She glanced at me, a reminder that there was a lot I didn't know about the reporter. As the Spitfire inched closer, the massive object came into view. It was as close to alien as I'd ever seen. Graveyard gray and at least 1,000 meters in diameter, its haunched extremities flared into immense arced protrusions, like the splayed talons of some primordial beast, curving inwards into a metal ball. A flicker of light coming from the sphere caught my eye. I yelled a warning, but it was too late. A brilliant white beam shot out from the alien sphere, engulfing the Spitfire. The searing light consumed everything, burning with an intensity that felt like fire. My vision blurred. I heard Langley and Resnick screaming. Maybe it was me screaming, as white light seared into my eyeballs and swallowed me whole. Chapter 1. I blinked the white spots from my eyes and rested a hand on the tactical station to steady myself. I glanced around the command deck. Shaped like an arrow, muted black hole and consoles, 3 seats in the front and Barra at my side in the middle at tactical. But something felt off. "Reaching Gaia in 2 minutes, Corporal Bishop said from helm. "Not too fast," Barra said, gracing me with a rare smile. "We don't want to ruffle any feathers. Lieutenant, send HQ the data packet." An encrypted packet explaining how we came to possess this Black Ops vessel. Hopefully, The brief message would satiate any misunderstandings, at least until we got a full debriefing.
Packet sent, ma'am.
Resnick looked over her shoulder from the comm station.
No response from HQ.
Bera and I exchanged looks over the bad news. A blinking red light drew my attention back to the tactical display. A squad of Duster fighters were exiting Gaia's orbit, arcing gracefully into an intercept course for the Spitfire. My hands tightened on the armrests of my chair. The Dusters looked like crimson dagger birds of prey, their sleek, angular frames gleaming with an alien crystalline sheen. Their lethal intent, unmistakable. "Strap in," I ordered. Bear and I buckled ourselves into the seats at the tactical station, which gave a 180-degree view of the command deck. I watched Dr. Saland in my peripheral vision, securing herself in the spare seat at the engineering station. "Welcoming committee," I muttered, eyeing the incoming fighters, now visible through the main viewport, typical V formation. My gut clenched. Not a second later, each of the 3 front Duster fighters launched a Lance missile. "Bishop!" I didn't yell, but the urgency of this situation was obvious. "On it, sir!" The Spitfire banked hard, the G-forces pinning me to my seat as streaks of stars whirled past the viewport. Corporal Bishop grunted, fighting the controls with all his might. The missile zoomed past us, but did a 360 almost as fast. Bera's fingers flew across her console. "Releasing solar chaff! Now!" A blinding cloud erupted outside, the 3 incoming Lance missiles detonating harmlessly in the superheated debris. Barely a minor setback. The military fighter squadron fanned out, all 7 ships now having a clear view of the Spitfire.
7 against 1?
Resnick said, dryly.
A bit overkill, don't you think?
I felt the heat inside me rising. No, not now. I have to remain in control. "Don't let them hurt us, Corporal." "Aye, sir." "Keep trying to contact HQ, Lieutenant."
"On it, General Titus,"
Resnick said, her fingers tapping furiously on her console. A pulse blast slammed into our starboard flank with a deafening boom, the deck bucking violently beneath us. Alarms wailed as the command deck's lights morphed into crimson.
"Why are they shooting at us?"
Dr. Saland's voice wavered, her knuckles white where she gripped the armrests. Langley's usually amused features were drawn tight as she swiveled her chair away from the cockpit.
"We're showing up unannounced in a Black Ops stealth ship that no one should know about."
True. Still, something wasn't adding up. These were our people. Allies. Unless... I clenched my teeth, forcing down the rising tide of doubts. "Power up lasers!" Bera's blue eyes flooded with disbelief.
"You're not actually considering firing upon our own people."
Another blast rocked the ship, winning us sparks from a shattered console. I held Bera's stricken gaze. My voice, a low rumble. "Bishop." "Sorry, sir," he grunted, sweat beading on his dark forehead as he struggled with evasive maneuvers. Langley shook her head.
"This doesn't make sense. They don't seem to care about their precious stealth ship."
Bera swallowed hard. "Lieutenant, tell the fighters that we surrender." Bera looked back at me, daring me to counter her command.
"They're ignoring my hails, ma'am."
Enough. I refused to simply sit here and die. "Get me my damn lasers, Bera." Her mouth went slack, eyes searching mine in stunned disbelief.
"I will not follow an illegal order, General."
Another pulse blast rocked our starboard side. Dr. Saland screamed as she and the engineering station went up in flames. Langley, way calmer than any civilian had a right to be, grabbed a fire extinguisher and shot Saland with a stream of foam. I softened my tone as much as I could manage, willing Bera to understand. "The lasers are for the missiles."
"Oh."
She blinked rapidly, processing my words.
"But they're not firing any." 7 Lance missiles headed our way,"
Resnick shouted over the alarms. "Bishop!" The corporal spun around, desperation on his face. "Sorry, sir. No way I can dodge all of them." "Keep trying." "Aye, sir." He turned back to helm, all of us knowing it was hopeless. I glanced down at Dr. Sallen's burnt corpse, covered in white foam. Langley stared at me, panic staining her pretty blue eyes. Resnick and Barrow were staring at me too, a silent plea for hope burning in their faces. But there was no hope. Not this time. I could only shake my head, the bitter taste of failure choking me. I'm sorry. The words had barely left my lips when the universe exploded in a blinding roar of fire and light. Searing heat washed away my skin and cries, sweeping all of us away, into oblivion. Chapter 2. The stench of scorched metal and someone screaming tore me away from death. Or from whatever just happened to me. My mouth tasted like a sour furball, and every part of me, including my fingernails, ached. I opened my eyes and found myself looking up at the command deck ceiling. Sallen's cries jolted me upright. On the deck, Dr. Sallen thrashed wildly. Her lab coat twisted around her as she screamed about being on fire. Langley tried to hold the sinologist down, murmuring reassurances that she was safe.
You're okay, Julie. You're fine.
Without thinking, I scanned the command deck, my heart pounding. No fires raged, no consoles sparked or crackled. Lieutenant Resnick hung limply over the comm station like a broken marionette. I shoved myself to my feet to check on her, when a muffled groan drew my attention. Captain Barra lifted her head, eyes unfocused.
What just happened?
Her voice was a ragged whisper. That's what I'm hoping Dr. Sallen can tell us. I offered Barra my hand. She grasped it, her grip like a vice as I pulled her to her feet. I turned back to check on Resnick, but she jerked upright, chest heaving.
What the hell? I just died.
Barra and I exchanged looks. I dreamed the same thing, I said, not liking where this was going.
So did I.
Barra's face lost its color.
Julie, are you all right? Yes.
Sallen, now back on her feet, avoided eye contact. Her red cheeks suggested embarrassment, but she didn't pull away from Langley.
I apologize. I don't know what came over me.
Resnick shook her head slowly and pointed at Sallen.
I saw you. On fire. Some kind of mass illusion?
Sallen suggested, still avoiding eye contact. I frowned at her. You don't really believe that, do you? Langley shot me a withering glare, silently warning me not to push. The xenologist obviously was traumatized. We all were. I ignored Langley. We needed answers.
It's gone.
Barra pointed a shaky finger at the viewport. The colossal alien sphere had vanished, leaving no sign it ever existed. I hurried to the tactical station and checked the scanners. We haven't changed positions.
Let me check the sensor readings.
Sallen disentangled herself from Langley and rushed to the ops console. She rapidly sifted through data, her brow furrowed in concentration.
Not a trace of quantum signatures, or much else except the usual electromagnetic radiation.
Barra straightened, visibly composing herself. Okay, let's consider what we have. She met my gaze, silently asking if I would challenge her taking charge. I gave a subtle nod of encouragement. Her experience made her best suited to lead this inquiry.
Am I the only one who had a vision of the Spitfire being destroyed by our military over Gaia, taking us along with it?
Resnick shook her head.
No, ma'am.
Sallen, Langley, and I confirmed that we had seen the same horrific scene play out.
But in reality, Barra continued, it appears we never left interstellar space. Any theories, Julie?
The xenologist hesitated, chewing her lip.
None of this makes sense.
Not quite the theory we were hoping for. Langley shot me a warning look. What about quantum physics? I offered.
You mean quantum superposition,
Sallen said, sounding more like her old self.
Existing in multiple states at the same time, like the multiverse or something.
We all turned to stare at Resnick. The lieutenant met our incredulous looks with a defiant glare.
Just because I want to be a Marine doesn't mean I'm stupid.
We know you're not stupid, Lieutenant, Salin said, a spark returning to her eyes.
Both theories are still regarded as fringe science, but after what I've witnessed today,
she spread her hands helplessly. Maybe we should let this lie for a few hours. I tried to smile. I think we could all use some rest. We can reconvene and analyze this further after we've had a chance to process it. Langley offered a dramatic sigh of relief.
Your best idea yet, Titus.
I shot her an annoyed look.
Well, one of your best ideas,
she amended with a smirk. As the others filed out, I caught Salin by the arm. Can you check on Bishop for me? And the simulant, too. Not that I cared in the least about Hadrian, but he was valuable government property. At least that's what I told myself. Salin nodded, her expression turning sober.
Of course I'll check, General.
I woke up ravenous, 18 hours and 5 minutes later, according to the ship's AI. Seated at a white rectangular table, Bear and Langley stopped chatting the second I stepped into the Spitfire's small galley. Langley was makeup-free, which made sense since we were on a military prototype ship designed for an all-male crew. The reporter still looked damn attractive. I shook my head, dismissing all such inappropriate thoughts from my mind.
Welcome back from the dead, handsome. Coffee?
Langley greeted me with a sly grin, gesturing at the battered metal carafe on the narrow table. Food would be good. I snatched a protein bar from the bowl sitting on the table and headed for the storage cabinets, rummaging for something more substantial.
Rest well, General?
Barra was playing it casual, but I could hear the probing undertone. She was fishing for information. I grunted an affirmative, keeping my back to them as I retrieved a dehydrated meal packet and shoved it into the microwave.
How are your wounds?
Barra asked.
So that's where she was going with this. Bishop will be out of the med tube in a couple of hours, she continued. You can go next.
I'm good, I said, keeping my tone light. The microwave chimed. I pulled out my meal. Hot vapor rose from the ready-to-eat packet and it felt hot to the touch. But it didn't burn, something that didn't escape Bear and Langley's notice. Langley chuckled as I joined them at the table. As I peeled back the cover, Langley slid a clean fork toward me.
You're real terrible at playing coy, Titus.
Not sure what you're talking about. I took a bite, keeping my eyes averted. Lasagna. Not bad. Certainly not great. Barra sat up straight, folding her arms.
We checked on you, General. Out of concern for your welfare, of course. Your temperature dropped to what's usually considered dangerous levels. Dr. Salin used a medical scanner.
I frowned at Barra between bites, but she pressed on, undeterred.
Julie also checked that nasty gash on your side from your fight with the Mechs. It's gone. Not even a scar.
I felt Langley's hand cover mine in a gentle, reassuring gesture.
Stop with the death stare already, Titus. This is Maureen's awkward way of saying we'll keep your secret.
I digested her words along with my food. I hadn't counted on being so comatose as not to wake up while getting a full exam. Guess I should be glad they didn't take my clothes off. Not long after waking up, I saw that my injuries from the Blackside base were all gone. Injuries that should have taken weeks or months to recover from naturally.
So what's the plan now? Langley asked. Don't be shy. We all know you have some crazy and likely suicidal scheme to get us past the Navy's duster fighters.
My gaze met Barra's. So you agree that contacting HQ before we land planetside is a bad idea? The captain winced, but didn't disagree.
I don't know what to think, but
Langley cut in.
Using the Spitfire stealth technology can help ensure that glimpse of the future, or alternate reality, doesn't literally kill us.
I nodded. Agreed. We need to get Bishop on board, though.
Without hurting him,
Bera added, her eyes boring into mine with an intensity that would have made lesser men flinch. I matched her stare. I'm not some monster.
I know that, General. Do you?
There was a pregnant pause as her barbed challenge hung in the air. Then Bera rose abruptly.
Coming, Donna?
Langley waved her off.
In a minute.
As the captain's bootsteps faded away, I found myself wondering if her blatant insubordination was any worse than my own subversive actions of late. I'm quite literally not the same man I was 2 years ago. My goal hasn't changed, Langley. She served up a flirty smile.
Donna.
I'm going to get everyone on this ship home and get back to my kids. Langley patted my free hand.
I know.
Her sapphire blue eyes remained locked on mine as she issued a terse command.
Computer, stop all recording inside the galley until further notice, and do not allow anyone to listen in.
Acknowledged, said the synthetic voice. I stopped eating. Only me and Bera should be able to do that. A humorless smile tugged at the corner of Langley's lips.
I'm the one who set up the system for you, remember?
She was right, of course, which didn't allay the sinking feeling in my gut. I'm not going to like this, am I? I took another bite of lasagna.
Probably not, but I did make a promise to you, and I'm a woman of my word.
Langley paused, letting the weight of her next words sink in.
You were right. I have been trained. To fight? Hack?
Our eyes met, twin orbs of steely determination.
Santorini's government started off fine. Not great, but nothing outrageous. But the last 2 years...
She shook her head.
The crackdowns, relaxation of cybernetic and robotic laws.
I wanted to tell her to stop. I did not, absolutely did not want to hear treasonous talk. But I owed it to Langley to hear her out. So I let her continue.
Santorini's cabinet is obviously corrupt, possibly even compromised.
By whom? The question came out in a hoarse whisper.
Mechanoids.
The word lingered in the air like a guillotine blade. I felt its edge slicing through the fragile trust I had allowed myself to build with this woman. I take it you're not the only one who believes this, I asked, trying not to sound dismissive. Langley shook her head, tendrils of dark hair cascading across her face. You're part of the Legion terrorist group.
They're not terrorists, and I never said I'm part of the group.
Good, seeing that it's an automatic death sentence. Langley's eyes turned hard.
You've been away for 2 years, Titus. You don't know what it's like, watching your rights taken away from you bit by bit.
Thought reporters are supposed to be objective.
Objective, yes. Stupid, no. People who disagree with Santorini's policies or wind up on his wife's naughty list tend to wind up dead or banished, like your wife and sons.
She might as well have slapped me in the face. Her words were that terrible. The metal fork now crumpled in my hand said as much. I don't want any part of it, Langley.
Too late, Titus. Doesn't the military coming after us over Gaia tell you anything?
That wasn't real. The words burst out louder than I intended, reverberating in the cramped space. Langley didn't flinch. Much. Her voice was calmer but no less intense.
Then why are you shaking, Titus?
I rose abruptly, tray clattering against the table edge. Langley watched me as I reined my temper. I never acted like this before, but... Langley, given our compromised situation, please focus, okay? Now I need you to get a message to General Paul Yang, under the radar. Give him a redacted version of what happened on Hydra Moon and let him know that we want to return the Spitfire, but only to him, personally.
He's the chief at defense.
And a former commander of mine. And friend.
That's a big ask.
Like you said before, this ship has lots of Black Ops toys. I fixed her with what I hoped was a convincing smile. Sign the message, Antonio Badger Titus. Her finely arched brows quirked upward. Badger's his nickname for me, I explained. He'll know the message is authentic. For a moment, I thought Langley might protest further, or even refuse. Then she gave me a sloppy salute, a ghost of a smirk playing across her lips. Aye, aye, General. Chapter 3. Gaia, mother world of humanity and prime target of the mechanoids. Home, waiting, like a forest green jewel floating on a pillow of black velvet. Everyone was at their stations. Bear and I at tactical, Dr. Saland at operations, and Resnick on comms. Langley managed the stealth systems, and Bishop sat in the center cockpit, ready to pilot us through the gauntlet of Navy vessels guarding the planet. Pardon, General, Bishop said, but shouldn't we be contacting HQ? Not if we want to make it planetside alive. Corporal, Bera leveled her gaze at Bishop. We're arriving unannounced in an experimental stealth ship that shouldn't even exist. Resnick clipped Bishop's shoulder with her fist. Want to be blown up, stupid? Bishop smirked, completely unfazed. Not particularly. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the tactical station. Then we're all in agreement. Your job, Corporal, is to get us past the Navy ships in one piece. Think you can do it? Absolutely, sir. Bishop swiveled back to helm and got busy. Everyone strap in if you haven't already, Bera said, checking her readings. I caught Saland's eye, seeing the fear flickering there despite her attempts to mask it. You okay, Doctor? She lifted her chin with a determined nod. I'm fine. Thank you, General Titus. Langley, our resident reporter, angled her chair to face me. Ready to cloak on your signal. Relieved that Langley was taking this seriously, I glanced over at Bera, who gave a succinct nod, confirming that she was with me all the way. Well, at least on this wild card of a scheme. Do it, Langley. Cloaking engaged, she replied. Sir? General Titus? I ignored the muffled chuckles rippling through the command deck. I even allowed myself the barest hint of a grin. A little levity right now would help the crew. We would soon need every ounce of focus to get through this. The command deck's white lights faded to a soft, warm blue color as the Spitfire's hyper-advanced camouflage systems cycled online. My tactical display showed our speed decreasing, a necessary precaution to further mask our heat signature. My seat vibrated ever so slightly as we streaked toward Gaia's exosphere. The planet's curvature rose to engulf us as we passed both civilian and military spacecraft, hanging silently in the black void. Easy on the speed, Corporal, Bera cautioned. Aye, ma'am. I found myself impressed by the captain's calm, commanding presence. For once, my ego didn't bristle at playing second fiddle. Bera's years of experience undeniably made her the most qualified to captain us through this crisis, reminding me once again that my rank of general was totally undeserved. Minutes ticked by in agonizing silence as Bishop navigated us past the patrolling frigates and battle cruisers, our cloaked ships slipping through their blind spots like a ghost. Outside, space was alive with anxious Gaia military ships, their dark hulls bristling with weaponry, ready to unleash hell at the slightest hint of danger. A frigate loomed ahead, its sleek, angular shape cutting through the darkness like a blade. Bishop's fingers twitched over the controls as we slid beneath its menacing bulk. So close. Close enough I swear I could almost see the rivets on its underbelly. The Spitfire's engine hummed along quietly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that at any moment we'd be detected and blown apart. Just as we cleared the frigate, a massive battlecruiser appeared on the tactical display. Bishop swerved, banking hard to avoid the ship's sweeping sensor arrays. The cruiser's cannons gleamed with lethal intent, ready to rain down destruction. Sweat beaded my forehead as we edged past. Until, finally, the battlecruiser receded into the blackness of space. Barely 3 minutes later, We were slipping into Gaia's lower atmosphere, the night giving us the illusion of cover. Excellent job, Corporal. Thank you, ma'am. You have my coordinates, Bishop? Aye, sir. LZ, 15 minutes. Thanks to Bishop's piloting skills, we made it in 12. We sat down with a gentle thump in an abandoned field, the tall grass flattening beneath the Spitfire's bulk. Langley and Sallend unfastened their harnesses, stretching their limbs as Bishop conducted final post-flight checks. Not hearing any traffic about unauthorized ships, Captain, Resnick reported, her eyes fixed on the comms console. She and the others had picked up on how to operate the Spitfire's equipment pretty fast. Vera straightened her jacket. Thank you, Lieutenant. Send the General's data packet now. Yes, ma'am. I felt a flicker of pride as Resnick efficiently carried out the order. She was learning how to be a good soldier. All right, listen up, everyone. I raised my voice to address the entire crew. There will be 3 or 4 teams, by my guess, who will secure us and the ship. Do not, I repeat, do not engage. But, no buts, Lieutenant. These men will most likely be under orders to shoot first, so we don't want to give them any reason to do so. Understood? Yes, sir. I turned away from Resnick and met each person's gaze in turn, ensuring my instructions had been received, loud and clear. I didn't bother with Bera because she was smart and experienced enough to understand our situation. Furthermore, I began, but Langley couldn't resist cutting me off. I think I preferred you when you were the strong, silent type. I leveled my fiercest glare at her, but caught Bera stifling a smile in my peripheral vision. That small gesture softened the rebuke I had been preparing. HQ will interrogate each one of you. When they ask you a question about anything, tell them the truth. Langley visibly tensed, no doubt fighting the urge to object, but she remained silent, her blue eyes staring back at me with disapproval. They might even hurt you. Do not resist. Just tell them the truth. Resnick's expression turned mutinous. Even about you, sir? Yes, Lieutenant, I said, allowing a thread of gentleness to bleed through my brusque tone. Even about me. All of them would fold under torture or drugs. HQ was going to find out about me. Best make it easier for everyone. Except me. My gaze went back to Langley once more. That doesn't mean you have to volunteer information. Bishop gave a curt nod. Understood, sir. Sallend's brow furrowed with worry. I don't think I can handle torture. I softened my voice further, trying to soothe her fears. You're a contractor and valuable scientist, Doctor. They'll have other ways to extract information from you. Sounds so invasive. Would you prefer me to lie to you? After a pained hesitation, the xenologist shook her head in resignation. Bera clapped her hands. Okay, people, let's close up shop and get outside. Don't take anything that doesn't belong to you, except any clothes you borrowed. She turned to me. Anything else, General? I surveyed the anxious faces around me. We had been through hell together, and right now, we actually felt like a team. No, Captain, I said at last. I think we're ready. It took the Black Ops team less than 40 minutes to make it to our location. 2 birds, 4 squads, and no less than 20 plasma rifles in our faces. Eat dirt, spat one guy to my far right. He and his team were, naturally, all dressed in black bodysuits and masks. And keep your hands on your head. How are we? I shot Resnick a warning glare. She gulped and nodded, then slowly and awkwardly as hell, lowered herself to the ground, turning her head slightly to the side so she could breathe, just like the rest of us. All of us hoping the next sound wouldn't be a bullet to the head. Chapter 4. This wasn't the first time I'd been inside an interrogation room. It was, however, the first time I was on this side of the table. Agents Coslow and Grant sat on the opposite end. The first with an electronic pen and pad that he hadn't used yet. And his partner, watching me with a cherry-lipped smile. The room was puke green and buried 2 levels underneath headquarters. The others would be here too. And there was absolutely nothing I could do to help them, let alone help myself. The ceiling lights cast a sickly glow over the table, minus the spotlight they had aimed at me. I kept my gaze purposely away from the mirrored window, knowing unseen eyes studied my every move, studied every breath I took. Agent Coslow, brown eyes sincere and friendly, offered me a self-deprecating grin. "Would you mind humoring me, General Titus? And tell me again, what happened to your team on Cronus?" Like most of his ilk, Coslow had asked the same question several times in several different ways. Curly blonde hair, athletic build, packaged in an off-the-rack navy blue suit. Typical. And yet, something wasn't quite right about him, or his partner, Agent Grant. Her perfect features sculpted into a bemused smirk as she continued observing me, one polished fingernail silently tapping the table. I squared my shoulders, the chains of my cuffed wrists clinking. After we delivered the package and detonated it, we were chased by Mechs. Coslow's brow furrowed in mock confusion. Into a mine. Keep it simple. Give them nothing. Yes, into the mine. A mine that gave you miraculous superpowers. Grant's full lips curved into a mocking smile as she raked her eyes over me as if she were sizing me up in a bar. And somehow made you look 15, 20 years younger. Probably increased your stamina as well. Grant winked, the gesture sending a shiver of revulsion through me. Too bad your wife's not around to enjoy the change. She was deliberately provoking me. Testing. Given my present circumstances, I wisely decided not to take the bait. Coslow's eyes had never left me. General, please answer. I leveled my stare at the electronic pad before him, still pristine and untouched. I'm waiting for the question. Coslow and Grant exchanged one of those inscrutable looks people give when they think you're playing dumb. Coslow's fake affability slipped a notch as he leaned forward. What happened to you and your team inside the mine, General? I don't remember. And you also don't remember how you wound up in Cronus's orbit, floating in a stasis pod? I nodded. The whole situation sounded suspicious, even to me. Please speak for the record, General. Coslow hadn't raised his voice, but there was a slight edge to it now. Good. I was getting to him. I don't remember. Coslow shook his head in disappointment. Not very helpful, I'm afraid, General. Can you at least tell us how your team died? I stared back at the agents' expectant faces, refusing to give them the reaction they so clearly craved. No. No what? Grant's smooth brow furrowed into a slight frown, her deep green eyes showing just a hint of malice. I looked at her. She stared back. Confident and gorgeous. The truth struck me like a plasma bolt. You're cyborgs. Grant and Coslow traded another cryptic glance, Grant's pouty lips quirking into a half smirk. I've been called worse. Coslow's friendly veneer slipped further, a glint of something predatory in his gaze. What makes you think we're augmented, General Titus? May I call you Titus? I met his oily stare with stony silence, sensing the trap beneath his words. General? His tone took on a vaguely paternal edge as he wagged his finger in an exaggerated show of disapproval. The condescending gesture grated on my nerves, but I managed to keep my anger in check, which has been harder to do since Cronus. Yes? What makes you think Agent Grant and I are augments? I allowed a faint, humorless smile to crease my chapped lips. Besides you using the euphemism augment instead of cyborg, I shrugged. Guess I can just smell plastic people. Kozlo's feigned geniality shattered like a brittle mask. He shoved himself to his feet before I could blink, the chair clattering away as he lunged across the table. His hand clamped around the back of my neck and slammed me face first into the table with a sickening crunch. As swiftly as the strike came, he released me, stepping back to straighten his jacket with a prim air of nonchalance. I eased myself upright, tasting copper as I wiped a trickle of blood from my split lip and busted nose. Grant frowned at her partner. "Hope you don't expect me to clean that mess up." She pointed a derisive finger at the spilled water, pooling on the table. "Now look what you made me do, General Titus," Kozlo said, sweetly, as he wiped up some of the spilled water near Grant. He left his handkerchief in the puddle and focused his attention back on me. "So tell me, General, how did you know about the Hydra Moon black site?" I spit out a gob of blood on the floor, which earned me a glare from Grant. A friend might have mentioned it. We were both extremely drunk on whiskey, but I certainly wasn't going to mention that to a PsyOps agent. "Your so-called friend is a security risk. What's his name?" I laughed at Grant without meaning to. "He's dead. Security risk plugged." Kozlo's expression took on a dangerous edge. "Be smug all you wish, General. You will submit to a lie scanner, as well as complete and thorough medical evaluation. Better to come clean now. Or..." Kozlo was quick, almost a blur, but I did see him leap up and position himself behind my chair. He wrenched me from my seat like a rag doll. White-hot agony lanced through my abdomen as his cybernetic fist drove into my gut, dropping me in a breathless, coughing heap onto the floor. The interrogation room's doors hissed open. General Yang stormed in, flanked by 2 grim-faced armed guards. Kozlo and Grant snapped ramrods straight, arms rising in crisp salutes that Yang returned with clear disdain etched in the hard lines around his mouth. "Why is General Titus on the floor?" Yang's voice was a low, dangerous rasp. Grant's reply came smoothly. "A misunderstanding, sir." I looked up from the floor to see Yang eyeing the 2 agents with undisguised contempt. "Then you better make certain that you don't misunderstand again. Get out of here." Kozlo and Grant hesitated, as if calculating whether attacking was worth the risk. "Yes, sir," Grant said, and spun on her heel and headed out. Kozlo right behind her. Chapter 5. I remained hunched on the floor, ribs screaming with every shallow breath. "You can stop playing possum now, Titus." Gritting my teeth, I hauled myself up and slumped back into the chair, locking eyes with Yang's. Wasn't playing possum exactly. That cyborg really does hit hard. Gaia's Minister of Defense settled into the opposite chair, sliding a pulsating green cube onto the table between us. Green meant that all signals and recordings would be blocked within the immediate radius. His 2 guards posted themselves at the door. They wouldn't be able to listen in either. Yang's obsidian eyes locked with mine, hair still as black as night. Yang looked the same as he did 2 years ago, except maybe for a few more lines around the eyes. "How do you know Kozlo is a cyborg? Is it because of the mechanoid implant inside your head?" I could only gape, struggling to process his words, as Yang pushed a sleek data tablet across the table. With shackled hands, I gripped the tablet's smooth glass surface, its secrets vibrating beneath my fingertips. "Our scientists think that little thing inside your head is mech-made," Yang continued, his gravelly tone leaving little room for doubt. "They would have to dig it out to be certain, which might leave you a walking vegetable." I could always count on Yang to be blunt, brutally so. I eyed my fallen glass for a moment, wishing there was still water in it. "What's stopping them?" "Me." A shadow of a smile played across Yang's lips. "For now. That, and the fact that you're a national war hero." The public doesn't know that I'm alive.
Yang's smile turned wolfish.
Well, I may have let classified information slip out to the media. By accident, of course.
Of course, I echoed, my tone heavy with skepticism. I had forgotten what a rogue Yang could be. He studied me through narrowed eyes, as if trying to peel away the layers of deception. There were a lot of layers, though. I wasn't sure I wanted to know what lay underneath. Yang's next words were warm, but measured.
So, are you?
I frowned, suddenly wary of this familiar stranger sitting across from me. Am I what?
A mech spy.
Blunt and straight to the point. I should have expected it. I considered his question. Was I a spy? Is the thing inside my head still active? Yang shook his head.
They blasted it with a targeted EMP. You might have some tissue scarring.
Great. The implant and my loss of memory point to me being captured by the Mechs. But for what purpose? A sleeper agent suggested a sophistication far from the Mechs from 2 years ago. Then again, Prometheus was certainly an upgrade. So anything's possible. Worse, the Mechs probably used the implant to locate Hydra Moon. It was because of me that Ethan and everyone died on Hydra Moon. I took a deep breath and shook my head. I don't think so. Certainly didn't feel like it when I was fighting them on Hydra Moon. And now that you've EMP'd my brain, think I'm clean. Eyes still sizing me up, Yang gave an almost imperceptible nod, his shoulders easing just a fraction. How's the Ajax crew doing? I asked, changing the subject. And Corporal Bishop?
They're still being interviewed.
Like me? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Yang shook his head.
You're the only one who can take on a cyborg with his hands cuffed and walk away.
He pointed at my face.
Could have sworn your nose was broken when I came in.
I shrugged, keenly aware of the battered mess I must look like. The pain had subsided minutes ago. Guess you were mistaken. Yang's dark eyes bored into me.
Do not play me, Titus. I'm the only friend you've got here at HQ with any kind of influence.
I brought you back your simulant, didn't I?
All busted up. Thank you very much.
I settled down. Can you fix him? Yang leaned back in his chair, looking me over with fresh eyes.
The Antonio Titus that I knew didn't give a damn about artificial life forms.
I don't. He didn't call me on my lie.
Hell, Titus, you look as young as when I first met you. Younger, even. What happened to you?
I took a deep breath.
Cronus.
It came out like a half whisper, closer to a croak. I glanced down at the cube on the table, still pulsating green and keeping our conversation private. I looked back up and met Yang's gaze. Douglas left us there, Paul. After we completed the mission. Yang's lips puckered, as if he just licked a lemon.
Don't let anyone else hear you say that. Douglas is a lieutenant general now, a powerful one at that.
Fine. You were saying? Yang took a moment to put his military game face back on.
The tech heads say they can put Adrian back together since you brought his memory crystal back intact.
I nodded and glanced at my cuffed hands. One less thing on my conscience. We studied each other in silence, sizing up the other's angle, calculating the delicate balance of trust and what to hold back. Finally, I spoke up first, my voice a rough rasp. What about the reporter? A wide grin spilled across Yang's face as he leaned back in the squeaking chair.
Donna Langley. Good-looking woman.
His smile took on a sly edge.
Are you screwing her?
Yang's question had been a carefully laid trap, and I'd stumbled into it face first. Sure, I didn't react. Much. But I was certain that my eyes sparked just enough to clue Yang in regarding our relationship.
Not that there was anything between Langley and me. She was useful, possibly a friend, someday. All that mattered right now was seeing Lavina and bringing Ian back home. Yang chuckled, clearly reveling in my discomfort.
Well, since you're not interested in her, you wouldn't mind if I ask her out.
Gritting my teeth, I forced nonchalance into my tone. Not at all. General Yang laughed in my face.
You are such a bad liar, Titus. Good.
He held my gaze with disturbing intensity.
Which means I can still trust you.
A test. Of course he was testing me. That didn't matter right now. I needed information.
What happened to my boys?
The question slipped out in a hoarse murmur, giving voice to the turmoil churning in my gut. Yang flinched before smoothing his features behind his mask of general. He watched me, gathering his thoughts before he answered.
I warned Ian to stop making trouble.
Trouble?
Speaking out against the government, against Santorini.
Yang leaned in closer.
I called in a lot of favors to get him banished instead of executed.
I felt a familiar heat swell inside me.
Like Carlos?
Yang remained stone-faced and silent. When he finally spoke, he sounded tired.
Everyone knows the charges against him were lies. Santorini wanted to make an example of him.
I shook my head, refusing to accept the painful truth.
Lavina.
My voice cracked over the name that haunted me ever since waking from stasis. Yang's jaw tightened, his gaze averting mine in an uncharacteristic display of discomfort.
Not my place to tell you.
My heart pounded against my ribcage as dread coiled in my stomach. She's alive, right? Yang nodded, but in a way that didn't make me feel better. I blew out a breath, forcing down the tempest of emotions roiling within me. Steeling myself, I met Yang's black stare. So? You going to get me out of here? A glimmer of the old warrior spirit flickered behind Yang's eyes.
Can I trust you not to blow things up?
I chuckled, darkly amused. I returned Yang's grin with a feral one of my own. I prefer plasma rifles these days. Chapter 6. 4 days. Innumerable medical tests and one ankle bracelet later, they set me free from headquarters. Yang hooked me up with a temporary apartment in Riverside, along with a line of military credit, given that all my assets and base salary had been frozen for the past 2 years, which might be one of the reasons why Lavina was living in such a dump. South Pienza, of all places, one of the city's smaller suburbs that could pass for a full-blown ghetto. On a good day. I checked the address on my wristcom again, confirming the seedy 5-story building looming ahead was Lavina's home. A pair of hard-eyed young men lounging against the crumbling building facade watched me approach with undisguised interest. I refused to meet their gazes, focusing instead on the hunched figure seated on the stoop. A hollow-cheeked man with a distinct odor of stale urine and hopelessness.
Hey, buddy. Spare credit or two?
He held out a grimy hand, broken nails stark against weathered skin. I waved him off and strode past without breaking stride, equal parts of me sickened and infuriated. How could I have let my little girl wind up in a garbage disposal like this? Unsurprisingly, the front door was unlocked. The building's entryway reeked of mold and despair. The elevator, scorched and graffitied, looked dubious at best. I took the staircase instead, 2 steps at a time. The 4th floor smelled almost as bad as the 1st floor. Cheap liquor, body fluids, and God knows what else. Apartment 4 Charlie, halfway down the hall. Lavina's door looked thick, steel, much newer than the walls surrounding it. I pivoted 90 degrees and snapped off a sidekick, sending the door crashing inside. The wailing of an infant welcomed me as I stepped on top of the door on my way in.
Lavina stood in the kitchenette, backlit by light filtering through flimsy curtains. A shiny pulse pistol aimed squarely at my heart. Pride swelled in my chest at the sure steadiness of Lavina's stance and the economical way she braced the weapon. Then my gaze dropped to her hands, and a line of revulsion carved through me. Cybernetic. Her cold stare didn't waver. "What happened?" I rasped, my throat suddenly dry. "To your hands." Lavina's dark eyes turned even colder. "Doesn't matter. Wait here." She set the pistol aside on a toy-cluttered dining table and headed for the apartment's sole door where the cries were coming from. I seized the momentary opening. "Can I see him?" She shook her head, eyes filled with disdain. "No. You don't deserve that honor." Well, at least she made clear how this reunion was going to play out. While Lavina vanished through a rickety interior door, I drank in the dismal reality of her living conditions. The space, minuscule as it was, showed signs of a losing battle against entropy. Peeling paint, stained and sagging surfaces, ramshackle furniture. How could this happen? Yang could have at least told me she had a child. A very young child by the sound of it. My grandson's crying had stopped abruptly, and Lavina reappeared. She kept her distance. "What happened to you?" Lavina raked her eyes over me. "Never thought you the type to get regen surgery." "I didn't get surgery." Lavina's laugh was a hoarse, bitter laugh. "What do you want?" "To see my daughter." The words escaped me before I could grasp their unintended harshness. "She's dead." I moved toward her instinctively, but Lavina shied away. Cold, defiant. "You were supposed to be dead too. No surprise the military was lying." The hurt in those brown eyes. I was learning fast that regret could drop a man to his knees. "I was stranded on Cronus. I've been trying to get back to you and Ian ever since." "What about Mom?" I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting to compose myself. "I'm sorry about your mother." "Which part?" The venom in her voice sliced like a whip. "Her supposed accident? Or being away all the damn time?" So there it was. The reason for all this hostility. Well, one of them. I stole a glance at the pistol lying on the table next to a fluffy toy. She didn't need a pistol. She had invisible knives to throw. "I'm military," I said, hating the hollow inadequacy of the excuse even as it fell from my lips. "That's what I do. Your mom knew this." "Did you know? About Mom's girlfriend?" Lavina's sneer cut like a laser scalpel. "I liked her. Claire wasn't flying off on secret missions all the time." I set my military mask on neutral, despite the fire glowing inside me. Sure, I'd suspected for years, but could never quite bring myself to voice the fear, to give it form, and to learn now that Adrian had brazenly carried on an affair with this Claire, someone my daughter had evidently known and welcomed into our fractured remnants of a family. I wanted to hit something, destroy something. But that wasn't why I was here. So I reined in my temper and asked quietly, "Why are you living here, baby?" Lavina's chin lifted in a defiant angle that reminded me of her mother. "You don't get to call me baby." Her point struck home, leaving a rent far more brutal than any physical wound. So much for being superhuman. I pressed on anyway. "My insurance was considered null and void until they confirmed your death." Lavina was visibly shaking. She was that angry. "If it weren't for Mom's insurance, we'd be on the streets. But now that General Titus, war hero, is back, maybe the military will hire me again." I closed the distance between us so quickly, Lavina didn't have time to protest as I folded her in my arms. "Let me help you." She didn't resist, at first. I felt her body tense, then she pulled away. "Yes, you can help me, by leaving. You're not loved, or wanted here. Now go away.
please."
I didn't want to go, but this conversation was over. I assured myself that I'd try again tomorrow, or the next after. I'll send someone to repair the door.
So now you're worried about me getting murdered in my sleep.
I turned without another word, retrieving the fallen door and shoving it back into its rusted track with as much care as I could muster. A hollow gesture of futility, but it was the least I could do. Pretty much in a daze, I barely noticed I was back outside until I saw the beggar reach out for me again.
"Hey, buddy. Spare a credit or two?"
I ignored him and headed down the block. Night was falling and the street was strangely quiet. Not one person, except me. I wasn't familiar with the neighborhood, but the absence of people still struck me as odd. No taxi, autonomous or not, would be stupid to come here at night. Not a problem since the transit tube was only a couple of blocks east. A whisper of gravel crunching behind me was my first warning. I was being followed. Good. I wanted to hurt someone right now. Meters before reaching the corner, I spun around, startling my pursuers. Of course, it was the two guys scouting me out when I first showed up. One on the left was tall and lanky with a tattoo circling his neck. His friend was bulkier, more muscular, and had his hands in his pockets. 2 against 1, I said. Hardly fair.
"Should have stayed on your military base,"
said tall and lanky.
"Now give me your credits."
"Come and get 'em." His friend did. Laser knife first. Moved pretty fast, too. Must have played sports because he almost tackled me. I pivoted right and smashed a left hook into his temple. His eyes rolled up into his head as he crumpled to the ground. I spun back around just in time to see tall and lanky whip out a military-grade pistol and fire. The first plasma bullet grazed my right side. His second shot plowed into my right shoulder. By that time, I was on him, and sending us both plunging to the ground. I kept a firm grip on his gun hand, eliciting a yelp as I crushed his fingers with mine. Tall and lanky took the brunt of the fall. I flipped him over and sat on his back, while cranking his left arm behind him, eliciting a gasp of pain.
"Who sent you?"
I snapped his pinky finger. Tall and lanky cried out and started begging. I snapped his ring finger next. More cries, mixed in with curses.
8 fingers to go. Better speak up."
"I don't know, I swear."
Tears streamed from his eyes.
"Not good enough."
I squeezed his middle finger.
"Military people, or government."
"How much did they pay you and your friend?"
2,000 credits.
Keeping one tight grip on tall and lanky's soon-to-be crippled arm, I checked his pants pockets, finally finding a credit chip. I really wanted to bust this guy's head open, but I had to be careful. Giving in to the fire inside would destroy everything I was working toward. I got up off tall and lanky and nudged him with my boot. "Stay down." Half his face still pressed to the ground, tall and lanky grunted what I assumed was acquiescence. I left him with his buddy and returned to Lavina's building. I knew what was waiting for me. The drunk looked up and offered his palm as if he'd never seen me before.
"Hey, buddy, spare a credit or two?"
Sure. I dropped the 2,000 credit chip in his hand, then headed to the transit tube. Mentally taxed and hungry, I collapsed onto the apartment's hard couch. The irony wasn't lost on me that this sterile living room could probably swallow Lavina's entire hellhole of a home. My eyes drooped closed, unbidden, as I mechanically consumed another protein bar, my 4th since my ill-fated reunion with Lavina. The bullet graze along my ribs was barely a scar now, but the burning ache in my shoulders served as a brutal reminder of tall and lanky's parting kiss. I didn't even have to lift my arm to tell that I smelled. I needed a shower, but I couldn't quite summon the impetus to move. Not yet. A series of chirps shattered my reverie. With a grunt, I activated my wrist comm. "Titus." A hologram of Yang's face appeared on my wrist comm.
"Glad you're still alive."
My spine stiffened as a chill of unease crawled down my neck. You know about... I let the accusation dangle, watching his expression closely.
How many bullets did you take?
Yang fired back, ignoring my question. 2.
Damn.
His mouth twisted into a bitter smirk.
My bet was 1.
A cold knot twisted in my stomach. The betrayal, bitter in my mouth. Not only did you know about HQ sending scum after me, you're actually betting on me?
Settle down, Titus. Surely you've figured out that HQ scientists aren't done with you.
His tone took on a mocking lilt.
Disappointed a couple of punks were able to get 2 slugs in you? So am I.
I slid a hand through my hair, struggling to tamp down the urge to lash out. Technically only 1. The first bullet grazed me. Yang's expression brightened.
Really? That's good news. Maybe I didn't lose my bet after all.
I stifled a sigh by glancing down at my ankle bracelet. Definitely have to do something about that. Perhaps Langley could spoof the damn thing, so HQ wasn't tracking him all the time.
How did the visit go?
Badly. Yang nodded, as if he expected as much. I took a bite of my protein bar before adding, Adrian was having an affair. Did you know about that? I watched Yang's hologram closely. He blew out a long breath before answering.
Not until after Adrian died.
I felt so incredibly stupid, but I didn't see judgment in Yang's eyes. Don't know why I'm surprised.
You shouldn't be.
Darkness crept in from the corners of my vision, constricting my world to a tunnel with Yang's thin smile at its core. Is that what happened to you and Isabella? Yang's smile shriveled.
Yes,
he said at last.
But I was the one doing the cheating.
I stared at Yang's hologram face floating above my wristcom, at the man rendered in flickering diodes of blue-white light. I let my next question roll from my tongue like a guillotine. What happened to Lavina, Paul? Yang visibly winced, though surely he had expected the question.
Forced entry. Torture.
Rape. Yang sighed.
She never filed a complaint, Titus.
I couldn't keep the venom from my voice. Why wouldn't she?
This isn't a secure line, Titus.
Why wouldn't she, Paul? Silence stretched between us, taut as a garroted windpipe.
To keep her head on her shoulders, most likely,
Yang murmured at last.
Maybe protect the baby. It was around the same time as Carlos's execution and Ian's banishment.
A cold knot of realization coalesced in the pit of my stomach. You're saying there's a connection?
I'm not saying a damn thing.
Yang met my smoldering glare with one of his own.
And you better not either.
The sudden chime of the doorbell shattered the charged tension between us like a fragmentation grenade. I surged to my feet, hands twitching with the muscle memory for a sidearm no longer there. Yang's tone held a note of appeasement.
Easy, soldier. That's HQ's dispatch medical team.
Snarling, I turned the full force of my glare on Yang's hologram. I don't need a damn doctor.
The team is here to examine and evaluate you, Yang said. See how fast you heal. Judging by this conversation, pretty quickly.
Send them away.
I'll do no such thing,
Yang countered, his customary reserve cracking ever so slightly.
Now, play nice with the medics.
Before I could object, Yang added,
or I'll make sure you play lab rat until your grandchildren have kids.
Whose side are you on, anyway?
Gaia's,
he said, simply.
Whose side are you on, Titus?
That, I realized, was a good question. Between the mech implant and the changes happening to my body, honestly, I wasn't sure. Chapter 7. I could count on one hand how many times I had to wear my dress whites. HQ normally discouraged public appearances for special ops agents. Tonight's celebration was supposedly for me. I didn't want to go, but Yang ordered me to attend, and to be friendly. So I smiled for the camera drones and chatted with the rich and influential who fawned over me like I was a demigod. Mr. War Hero, a man who lost his entire team. Yeah, big hero. The gilded hall pretty much dripped with opulence. A soaring ceiling adorned with glittering chandeliers, plush carpets swallowing footfalls, and a live string quartet to provide that extra touch of elegance. Perfumed air swirled with the effervescent chimes of crystal flutes, while tuxedoed waiters wove between pockets of attendees, proffering trays laden with colorful delicacies and bubbly drinks.
Tell us what Cronus was like, General Titus,
gushed an overcoiffed socialite. I flashed her a tight smile, tamping down the urge to gnash my teeth. Sorry, classified. A trill of polite laughter rippled through the cloying gathering as I extricated myself, only to be snared moments later by another pack of eager admirers. This event spelled the end of any future Black Ops work, almost as much as being promoted to general, though no one could argue Cronus did the same thing. I suddenly felt uncomfortable, enough so to look over my shoulder. Agent Coslow, looking impeccable in an immaculate black suit that hinted at his lean muscles without bragging. Meeting my gaze, the seasoned PSYOP specialist raised his crystal glass in a cheery salute before draining its contents in one fluid motion. The two of us would tussle again. It was inevitable, and it would be my job to beat that smile from his lips with one of his cybernetic arms. I felt Yang's approach before I saw him, a whisper of expensive cologne along with his scent drifting through the hall's recycled air. My former CO looked sharp in full-dress uniform, his medals glittering like diminutive stars across his chest. On his arm hung a raven-haired vision of beauty, Langley, draped in a plunging midnight gown that hugged her curves to distracting effect. "General?" Yang's smile was warm and genuine. I snapped off a crisp salute, which he returned with equal polish. "General? Miss Langley?" Langley actually giggled, her eyes sparkling with amusement.
The man saves me from a horde of raging mechanoids, and he still refuses to call me Donna.
Yang lifted up Langley's pale hand and kissed it. "His loss." I felt heat prickling at the nape of my neck and cleared my throat. Miss Langley gives me far too much credit. I wouldn't be here if not for her skills. "I agree." The man was practically purring. "She is a clever woman." Langley arched a sculpted brow, her lips curving into a smile.
"You're just saying that because you want to get me into bed, General."
"Oh, you are naughty."
They shared a conspiratorial laugh, one which I most certainly did not join, and I absolutely didn't feel the slightest twinge of jealousy. Langley had been a means to an end, nothing more.
"Be a treasure, Donna, and freshen up our drinks, please."
Langley's eyes raked over me, judging me, no doubt. She aimed her pout at Yang.
"I'll give you gentlemen 3 minutes."
Langley claimed Yang's half-empty glass and sashayed toward the hors d'oeuvres table. Yang's approving gaze followed her swaying hips before returning his attention to me.
"Quite a woman,"
he murmured, almost to himself. Total understatement. I took a prudent sip from my champagne glass. "Quite."
"Sure you don't mind me dating her?"
I nearly choked on the champagne bubbles, but recovered quickly. "Why would I mind?" Yang silently regarded me before chuckling.
"Good. Thank you for the confirmation, Titus."
"What confirmation?" I growled, around a sudden tightness in my throat.
"That I can easily spot you in a lie."
His smile remained firmly in place, but his eyes had lost all mirth.
"I'm putting my neck on the line for you, so it's good to know."
He moved closer.
"I caught your 2 lies over the comlink, but there was still a remote chance that you were acting. Up close and personal, it's obvious that you're still a terrible liar."
He's still worried about me being a mechanoid spy. Guess if I were in his position, head of Gaia's military forces, I would be worried about me too. Yang gave me a conciliatory pat on the back.
Did Donna tell you where she picked up her shooting and hacking skills?
I took another sip from my glass and parked my expression in neutral.
So you do know. And you're protecting her.
Yang's dark eyes sparkled.
Good. Unlike the Ajax crew, Donna's good at tripping up people like our friend over there when it comes to interrogations.
Yang inclined his head toward Kozlo, who continued playing the role of disinterested observer, blending in with the crowd and other security agents.
They're watching her, wondering if she's compromised.
I let out a slow breath. She's a reporter. Yang's soft laugh was utterly devoid of humor, as his eyes tracked Langley weaving her way back through the glittering crowd, 2 flutes of pink champagne in hand, and a smile playing on her crimson lips.
We both know she's much more than that.
I stiffened, and not just because of Yang's declaration. Yang followed my gaze.
Commander Calvin Douglas, now a rear admiral judging by the 2 stars on his white collar. Keep looking at the man like that, Yang said, and you'll scare him away.
I wanted to do more than scare Douglas. I wanted to kill him. It was his orders to abandon me and my team on Cronus. A camera drone swooped in before I could do anything stupid. Damn thing wasn't recording. It was waiting. Prime Minister Santorini and his ravishing wife glided toward us, flanked by 2 stone-faced sentinels in severe formal wear, and Agent Grant, armored in a deep burgundy lace dress. Gaia's power couple exuded an effortless magnetism that seemed to part the crowd before them like a monumental force of nature. Tamora Santorini's beauty rivaled the mythic goddess Venus, and Prime Minister Santorini looked every inch her Adonis. Youthful yet experienced, ruggedly handsome but exuding a dignified aura of cultivated respectability. Both of them, the unmistakable products of youth regeneration treatments, available only to the ultra-elite or those willing to spend a fortune. "Greetings, Titus." Santorini enveloped me in a bear hug, his pretty face, by some stroke of luck, still aimed at the now recording camera drone. He just as quickly pulled back and addressed Yang. "General?"
"Prime Minister?"
I noted how the security detail maintained a good 4 meters distance from the Santorinis. The 2 men were tall and bulked up, but I had little doubt that Agent Grant was the deadliest one, even in a knee-length dress and heels. She was, after all, a cyborg. I would have to remember to ask Yang just how much of her was machine. "Picture time," Santorini sang with a politician's grin, gesturing toward the hovering camera drone. I managed to smile as the 4 of us clumped together. Tamora draped herself against Santorini and dished up a supermodel smile. After a good 2 minutes of nauseating photos, Santorini waved the camera drone away, turning his attention back to me. "Welcome home, hero," Santorini proclaimed, raising his champagne glass. "I trust Yang and the military are treating you well?" I felt Yang's eyes drilling into me, so I ground out a yes.
2 years.
Tamora's words were gentle.
We thought we lost you too, along with the Larbus.
Awkward silence fell over us, broken only by the hushed sounds of crystal against crystal. I found myself suddenly terribly aware of each ponderous inhale, each sluggish exhale around me. "I am sorry, Tamora," I murmured at last, the words feeling woefully insufficient. Her exquisite mask cracked for the briefest instant, a fleeting glimpse of raw anguish giving voice to her bitter hate.
"Why should you be sorry, General? I'm sure you didn't mean to leave Alarbus behind on Cronus."
And there it was, the thorny core of her fury, the recrimination I would never be able to refute or outrun. I couldn't blame her for hating me. She's right. Santorini slipped his arm around his wife's slender waist, the gentle squeeze of his fingers belying the shrewd, guarded aspect of his expression. "We miss him every day," Santorini said at last, his tone taking on a slight sharpness. "It's hard. I'm sure you can relate." "Yes." The single word felt like shards of glass in my throat. "Which is why—" Yang's hand clamped down on my shoulder with gentle but unmistakable firmness, a silent warning to stay my tongue. But when have I really been a man of reason? "I was hoping you could help me with Ian." Santorini's polished smile faltered, the veneer of geniality cracking to reveal the churning resentment simmering beneath. "He's banished, Titus. Not much I can do about that. The courts have spoken. But I already gave you my answer, General." Though his tone remained conversational, an unmistakable edge honed his words. My skin prickled. Looking past Santorini, I could see that his security team had tensed ever so slightly, ready to strike me down. Agent Grant, however, rewarded me with a thin smile that mirrored her eyes, but not her intentions. "Yes, sir," I forced out, keeping my teeth clenched to hold back the surge of anger boiling inside. I couldn't afford to lose it here. They would lock me away for good. Eyes on me, Tamora slipped an arm around her husband's, pressing herself against his side with practiced intimacy.
"I'll talk to him, Titus."
"Great. I can forget about ever bringing Ian home."
"Enjoy your party,"
Tamora said over her shoulder as she and Santorini turned their backs on him. Yang and I watched in silence as Gaia's first couple swept away, their stiff-backed security team forming an impenetrable blanket behind them. Only after they had disappeared into the glittering crowd did my former CO allow a frustrated exhalation to spill past his lips.
"That was stupid."
Conceding the point with a dull nod, I felt Langley's arrival more than I saw it. My sense of smell was far too sensitive these days.
"You gentlemen don't look too happy,"
she purred, sliding Yang's replenished glass into his hand. His demeanor shifted with liquid seamlessness, a sensual warmth overtaking the no-nonsense officer I've come to know.
"Now that you're back, I don't think even ol' stick-in-the-mud here can complain."
Langley rewarded him with a dazzling smile, sculpted lips parting to reveal a hint of even white teeth.
"Oh, I'm sure he'll think of something."
Draining the last few mouthfuls of my own tepid drink, I fought against the tide of bitterness roiling inside me. At this situation, at myself, at everything. When I finally trusted my voice, it emerged in a bark of mirthless dismissal. "I'm going to get myself another drink. Enjoy." Abandoning Yang and Langley without a backward glance, I allowed my leaden footsteps to carry me across the carpeted expanse toward the well-stocked bar. 2 hours. I've only been here 2 goddamn hours. But I wouldn't go running like some scared newbie punk. So I grabbed another drink and steeled myself as I scanned the crowd for someone new to speak to, and caught myself staring at Agent Kozlow, still watching me from across the room. Chapter 8. I was actually going to Cestius to get my boy. Man, I reminded myself, he's almost 27 now. I slung the duffel bag over my shoulder, heading through the Navy shipyard toward the newly christened star cruiser, Equitas. The blowtorches and burning metal filled the air, mingling with the ever-present hammering of machinery and soldiers chatting. A beep sounded from my wristcom, pulling me out of my reverie. I glanced down to see General Yang's encoded number. With a frown, I tapped to accept. "Titus."
"Look behind you, General."
I spun at the sound of Yang's voice, bristling internally at how he'd managed to creep up on me. But there he was, Trademark smile spread across his seasoned features as he approached.
Losing your touch, Titus. I could have taken you out easily.
Hardly, I chuckled, patting my abs. This new body is nigh invincible.
So the science gooks tell me.
Yang motioned his head right, gesturing for us to walk. What's up? A little late for another briefing. Yang's face turned serious as we fell into step.
More like a warning.
I flashed him a tight smile, trying to ease the tension but failing. You're not going to surprise me by telling me Santorini is setting me up for failure. Yang's expression turned grave.
Don't pretend you have a sense of humor, Titus. You saw how they were at the celebration. The Santorinis are very, very bitter about losing their youngest.
I know. So why agree to let me bring Ian home? He looked me square in the eye.
Revenge.
I stopped, mostly because we arrived at the Equitus. Nice ship, I said. Paint hardly looks dry. Of course, it wasn't paint. The reflective polymer coating supposedly deflects some of the energy from laser attacks and space radiation.
Cassandra class,
Yang said, appreciating the ship's flat crustacean shape. Length, 200 meters. Width, 100 meters. And its height, half that much, at least according to the specs. I eyed the deadly bumps underneath the ship. Missiles?
6 Dragonfly models, I believe.
The undercurrent to Yang's tone put me further on edge. We lapsed into silence for a few beats. Then, unable to contain myself. You know, Lavina is one hell of a soldier.
Was.
Yang took a deep breath.
I'll see what I can do. Now that Santorini's relaxed the cybernetic law, she might be eligible.
Appreciated. For everything. Yang eyed me.
The operative word is thanks. When's the last time you said thank you for anything?
I thought about it for a moment and couldn't remember, so I asked the question that was on my mind. What do you think the Santorinis are up to? Yang glanced around, then leaned in close.
Unofficially, between you and me, someone with influence, or several someones, have been in contact with the Mechs, at least since Cronus.
I stared at him in disbelief. A traitor in their midst? You're kidding. Yang's headshake said it all. Realization crashed over me like a wave. Are you actually suggesting the Legion terrorists are right about Santorini?
I'm suggesting that you be very careful.
Yang's eyes were on the Equitus once again.
There's a lot I can't say outright.
He straightened, all business once more.
Contact me when you arrive at Cestius, and again after you've left the system.
I could only nod dumbly. Okay. You take care too. Yang spun on his heel and strode away without another word. I watched him go, wondering if I'd ever see my old commander, and wondering what other secrets he was holding back. I adjusted the duffel bag on my shoulder and hurried to the Equitus's underbelly and its ramp. A young, muscled Marine, just a kid, really, was waiting for me. Dressed in light armor with only a side laser pistol, he snapped to attention and offered me a smart salute.
General Titus, sir!
I automatically returned his salute. At ease, Private. I glanced at his name tape. Harper?
Take your bag, sir?
No, I'm good, Private. We started up the ramp into the belly of the Equitus. What time are we dusting off?
0800 hours on the dot,
Harper said, with a wide grin.
Captain runs a tight ship, or so I'm told.
We walked up the ship's ramp, Harper chatting away as if he were a tour guide.
Captain Barra says to escort you to the bridge once you're settled in your quarters.
Harper practically vibrated with eagerness, reminding me of Resnick. I took full advantage of the talkative Marine, asking about the crew count, hours spent training on the new ship, and other details. Private Harper had no qualms about sharing information about the new hires, like XO Warren Butler and Chief Engineer Grant. He also pointed out the ship's self-cleaning walls and other features during the quick tour. Still, Yang's words of warning stuck with me. Eventually, we reached the science lab. Dr. Saland, looking refreshed and professional in a white uniform, greeted me with a warm smile.
"I'm glad to have you aboard, General."
"I'm sorry to pull you from shore leave, Doctor." She waved off my concern and smiled.
"To assist you with bringing your son home from exile? Absolutely worth it."
The words, "thank you," stuck in my throat. Maybe if I said them more often, Adrian wouldn't have gone looking for anyone. A lie. I was deployed far too often, married to the military instead of to her. I scanned the lab. It wasn't exactly small, but it wasn't super large either. Plenty of equipment, though. "Dr. Saland is the best, sir," Harper beamed.
"You're too kind, Private Harper."
And too talkative, I thought to myself. But he was the kind of information spout I needed right now. "Has Dr. Faber's replacement been assigned yet?" Saland's smile slipped a notch.
"HQ assures me we'll have someone when we return to Gaia. Doubtful he or she will be as good or as experienced in astrophysics as Alan, but one can hope."
I left Saland to her work and headed to the XO's quarters. Eventually, the kid led me to a cramped berth, little more than a coffin, really.
"Your quarters for the trip, General,"
he said, with the pride of someone who could only dream about not sharing a bunk.
"I'll wait out here and take you to the bridge."
I grunted in affirmative and stepped inside just long enough to stow my duffel bag. Harper then marched me to the Equitas Bridge, chatting all the way. A Marine guarded the door, which, along with Harper, suggested that HQ was taking pirates seriously now. Private Jones offered a crisp salute, which I returned. The hatch slid closed behind me with barely a sound. I wasn't surprised to see Resnick manning comms, but seeing Hadrian and Corporal Leon Bishop was unexpected. Intentional? I wasn't granted access to the crew's personnel profiles until I stepped on board the Equitas.
"General on deck!"
shouted Resnick. Her features split by the same megawatt smile she'd beamed at me when we first met on the ill-fated Ajax. Everyone, except Harper, saluted, and I returned it. "Thank you, Private Harper. You're dismissed," said XO Butler. Harper darted a quick look at Resnick.
Yes, sir."
He made a fast retreat. My gaze swept over the bridge, which was only a little larger than Bera's first ship. Curved console stations lined the front viewports, displaying Gaia's warm green sky. Helm was front and center, while two crew pits, one for weapons, one for tactical, gave the bridge a unique, almost alien quality. The centralized command chair reminded me of those old naval vessels, elegant in a way and angel white, but mostly functional. The Equitas was no Spitfire, but it was one sweet ship. Captain Bera stepped forward to greet me.
"Welcome aboard, General Titus."
"Good to see everyone."
"It's great to see you too, General,"
Resnick said, earning an elbow from Bishop. "Stop fangirling already," Bishop muttered. Resnick elbowed him back. One look from Bera stopped them both. She turned to a tall man standing beside her.
"This is my XO, Commander Warren Butler."
Butler offered his hand, which I reluctantly took. "It's a true honor, General. What you and your team did for the cause back on Cronus
is something the General would rather not discuss, Commander,"
Bera said, her smile tight. "Oh." Butler looked crestfallen. "Yes, quite right. I do hope we'll get to talk during our trip to Cestius. I'm sure we will. Definitely owed Bera one for the quick save. But none of this felt right. All of us back in one place. Resnick and Saland made sense, but Hadrian? A simulant worth building a multi-billion credit secret facility for. Plus Bishop, a Marine pilot who should be reassigned to a Black Ops unit. "May I speak with you, Captain, privately?"
"Of course, General. After we make our first jump."
She turned to the ops station. Hadrian, please escort General Titus to the transit hold bay. My pleasure, Captain. Hadrian smiled and gestured to the hatch. After you, General. I nodded, not about to thank Bera for the kick to my balls. I gave a second quick scan of the bridge's occupants, then proceeded the simulant through the hatch. The corridors were narrow, almost as narrow as the Spitfires. Walking alongside the simulant, I felt uncomfortable. Hadrian seemed content with the silence, but I figured I owed him at least a nice word. Sorry you got stuck with babysitting duty. Hadrian offered a wry smile. Actually, I requested this task. Why? I wanted to thank you. For what? For saving me. He stopped at the deck ladder. You had my memory crystal. You didn't have to carry my shell into the Spitfire. Yet you did. I shrugged, feeling exposed. Well, you saved me first. All of us. Guess we're even. For now. Hadrian's roguish grin was uncomfortably human. I can find my way to transit. My orders are to escort you to the transit hold bay. Hadrian started to climb down the ladder. And I always follow orders, General. His head disappeared through the hole in the deck. I followed quickly behind. So why did you bother with us back on Hydra Moon? You jeopardized yourself by helping us. We nearly reached the transit hold bay before Hadrian answered. Sometimes, General, orders require interpretation, rather than blind literal translation. He stopped outside the transit hold bay's door. Someone is waiting for you inside. I'm sure you'll be quite pleased. I wasn't. Chapter 9. I hit the panel to open the transit hold hatch. Waiting for me, Donna Langley, as stunning and annoying as the last time I'd seen her at my supposed welcome home celebration. The door barely closed before she practically threw herself into my arms. "Kiss me, you fool!" Before I could react, she whispered in my ear, "Shh." I held her, awkwardly, like a teenager embracing his first crush, while Miss News Reporter pecked away at her mini datapad behind my back. She pulled away just as abruptly, waving her stylish datapad at me. "There. I'm spoofing the bug they've hidden on the bottom of the view screen. We have 5 minutes, starting 10 seconds ago." HQ planting bugs on the Equitus didn't surprise me. Having Langley on board did. "What are you doing here?" "You don't look very happy to see me, Titus." "I'm not." "Ever the charmer." Langley's lips curved into a wicked smile before disappearing completely. "My editor gave me an ultimatum. Tag along after you to Cestius or lose my job." Giving myself time to consider her words, I took in the transit hold bay. 6 stiff-looking brown reclining seats faced forward, designed to expand and cover their occupants during FTL flight. That's odd. I kept my voice non-committal. "What's odd is that everyone who survived Hydra Moon is now aboard this tub. The military thinks I might be some sort of covert agent for the Legion. For the record, that's ridiculous." It was anything but ridiculous. Reporters were smart, but having combat and hacking skills? Plus, what Yang said. Chances are, Langley was definitely Legion, or associated with them at the very least. "Don't look at me that way. You're the one who pissed off someone high up." Langley took a breath. "So who is it?" "Santorini," I finally admitted, "and his wife." Langley considered my words. "That makes sense. You come home, their youngest boy doesn't, and Tamora is known for being a vindictive I wagged my finger. I was going to say belladonna." "Sure you were," I snorted, tamping down the unexpected feeling of warmth at our easy banter. Langley tapped her datapad on her thigh, deep in thought. "So, there's ample motive to get rid of you and me, but how do the others fit in?" I shrugged, wishing I could see the connection. "Doesn't make any sense. Barra's as loyal as they come."
I thought you liked her. I do, Titus. I like you too. But that doesn't make me blind to your many faults. She cocked her head, expression turning serious once more. Do you think the Equitus might be booby-trapped? The thought had crossed my mind, but I was trying not to give voice to it. It's possible, I suppose. Do you think you can convince Maureen to do a search? I doubt it, but I can try. Didn't you share your concerns with her? I shook my head. She dismissed me before I could. This bit of reporting earned me a grin from Langley. You do realize this is much bigger than the Santorinis. Perhaps you should tell General Yang of your concern, unless you suspect him too. Paul? I seriously doubt that he's a traitor. Figured that out before or after you slept with him. Langley's expression turned sly. You sound almost jealous, Titus. I'm not. Good. It was just business. Okay, I'm lying. It was also a lot of fun. You should try sleeping with him. He's a very talented man. Noting my death stare, Langley held her hands up in surrender. All right, Mr. Straight Shooter. So, who can we trust? I mulled it over. Resnick, Bishop, and Dr. Salland. Private Harper, too, I suspect. What about Maureen and Hadrian? Good question. 5 dry as dust protein bars and 4 agonizing light hours later, I was finally granted an audience with Her Highness, Captain Barra. Yeah, I shouldn't be so harsh in judging her. Barra did have a ship and crew to run, but frustration simmered in my gut. An uncomfortable mix of anxiety over seeing Ian again, and dread that something could still go catastrophically wrong. Barra's sparse office was barely larger than the box-sized quarters she'd loaned me. Not a single personal effect dressed the bare Durasteel bulkheads. No family hollows, no keepsakes, no individualized touches whatsoever. The blank slate left me wondering how Barra would etch her identity onto this impersonal space once she got settled. Please, have a seat, General. Barra gestured to the rigid chair facing her desk, its contours promising zero comfort. Much like the woman herself, I suppose. I lowered myself onto the unyielding surface, watching as the captain took a long sip from her steaming cup of coffee. Like Dr. Salland, Barra's face looked smooth and refreshed. Her desert tan uniform was crisp and immaculate, no wrinkle in sight. Would you like a cup? Barra offered, setting her coffee on a plastic coaster. I shook my head. Ever since Cronus, what I craved most was food, and plenty of it. Barra simply nodded and leaned back slightly in her chair. ETA to Cestius is 13 light hours. Now, what can I do for you, General? Drawing in a steadying breath, I met her pretend warm gaze. How did your debriefing with PsyOps go after Hydra? Surprise lit up Barra's blue eyes that disappeared in an instant. They were quite thorough, she admitted. They wanted to know a great deal about you. I nodded sagely, totally unsurprised by the revelation, and I would be a fool to think that HQ was done testing and evaluating me. Sorry you had to go through that. Barra shrugged. At least they didn't rough me up. Then again, I don't have a big mouth like Resnick. They hurt Resnick? I couldn't keep the spike of anger from my voice. The kid had been through enough trauma already. Don't worry, General. A hint of amusement crept into Barra's voice. She's tougher than most of the males under my command. Resnick will make one hell of a Marine one day. So why hasn't she transferred to the academy? Barra took another pull from her coffee. Headquarters insists she finish her tour aboard my ship first. I frowned at that bit of intel. What about Bishop? The question seemed to catch Barra off guard. She arched one brow as she set her cup down with deliberate care. I didn't realize this was going to be an interrogation, General Titus. Waving my hand, I tried to downplay the unintended implication. Not an interrogation, Captain, just curiosity. For several long moments,
maybe a minute. She stared at me, as if weighing the truthfulness of my words. Finally, she inclined her head a fraction. "So what's on your mind, General?" I chose my next words very carefully. "I'm beginning to wonder if this entire trip to Cestius isn't a setup." Bera's eyes flashed with surprise, but to her credit, she didn't utter a single word of protest, possibly just letting me hang myself. "I'm sure you've noticed all the survivors from Hydramoon are now aboard this ship," I continued. "Of course she has. I'm making a real mess of this. Diplomacy has never been one of my strong suits." Bera was back to sipping her coffee, more slowly this time, and she watched me make a fool of myself. Squaring my shoulders, I met her gaze as I continued. "I know this sounds paranoid, Captain, but I can't shake the feeling that someone is out to kill me." Bera merely stared at me in silence, doubtlessly gauging my sincerity and mental stability. "That's a hard sell, General." Well, at least she hadn't outright dismissed me as paranoid and delusional. Leaning forward, I pressed on. The pirate attack, the Mechs assaulting the Hydra moon base, our own navy blasting us to hell before we reached Gaia. Setting her mug aside, Bera shook her head. "That last one wasn't real, General. Our forces never attacked the Spitfire." "So you're saying it was some kind of dream?" "I don't know what it was, but surely you're not implying that Command itself orchestrated any of those events. If they truly wished us gone, they could find far easier and cheaper ways." It was a good point. Extremely pragmatic, just like Bera. And at that moment, I couldn't exactly refute her argument based on the flimsy information that I'd managed to put together so far. Still, my instincts told me that a much larger game was being played here. I just had no clue of the rules. "Have you discussed these concerns with Donna?" Bera asked, seeming to sense the direction of my thoughts. I frowned at her. "Is there a problem with that?" The barest hint of exasperation crossed the captain's features before she hid it. "She's a civilian, General. A reporter, no less." "I'm well aware of Langley's occupation, Captain." "Are you also aware that she's in love with you?" "Well, as much as she can be in love with anyone, I suppose." The words, spoken so matter-of-factly, threw me for a split second before I regained my equilibrium. I almost smiled. The notion was so ridiculous. "Donna flirts with everyone." To my surprise, Bera's expression softened fractionally, a hint of genuine empathy bleeding through her ramrod-straight posture. "Perhaps she wouldn't if you treated her more like a lady." "You're out of line, Captain." Bera flinched, but only slightly. "You're right, of course. My apologies, General." What Bera did next made my mouth drop in utter astonishment. Despite all we had gone through, Bera kept her emotions and dealings with me in check. Yet here she was, leaning forward and extending her hand toward mine as if to offer reassurance or comfort. I pulled back as if burned. Bera sighed, withdrawing her hand as her rigid professionalism slid back into place. "General, this should be a joyous time, not one of confrontation. You're finally going to be reunited with your son after 2 years and bring him home from banishment." Like I needed the reminder. Well, perhaps I did. The reality of seeing Ian again was both tantalizing and terrifying. What would he think of me now? Of the person? No. Monster that I'd become. Swallowing hard, I leaned across the desk and dropped my voice to a low rasp. "My gut tells me something is deeply wrong about this situation, Bera." Bera blew out a slow, steady breath and settled back into her chair. "Your gut, General." The skepticism in her tone made my jaw tighten, but I pressed on. "It was my gut that told me we needed to get the hell off Hydra Moon." I locked eyes with Bera. "Remember?" To her credit, Bera didn't look away. "Yes," she said at last, a glimmer of something akin to gratitude shining behind her eyes.
I remember you saving all our lives that day, but I also remember, she hesitated, as if carefully weighing her next words. You lost control, General. Several times. Whatever happened to you back on Cronus, it affected far more than just your body. Prometheus confirmed it. You need help, General.
That's what I'm asking for, Bera.
You know that's not what I mean, General. Bera leaned forward. You require professional help before whatever damage was done consumes you completely.
I held her gaze, riding out the flare of rage and humiliation until it passed. When I spoke again, my voice was tight but level. So you won't even consider what I'm saying might be true. Bera sighed, sinking into her chair.
Let's say your suspicions are correct. Someone is out to kill you, along with my crew. What would you like me to do about it?
I didn't even have to consider my response. Search the Equitus. Every compartment, every crawl space. Check for any signs of explosive devices. Sabotage, anomalous code. Anything out of the ordinary. Bera's thoughtful expression didn't waver, maintaining the same unreadable professionalism. For a long moment, the only sound was the whisper of recycled air.
That's a significant request, General.
I held her gaze. I'm well aware, Captain. Bera rose abruptly, signaling the end of our meeting. I stood as well and activated an app that Langley uploaded to my wristcom, then started to sweep it across her plastisteel desk. She watched me, with a mixture of curiosity and disapproval, as I continued the strange movements with my wrist. A light on my wristcom flashed red.
Very well, General. I'll order a thorough security sweep initiated immediately.
Her blue eyes turned calculating.
But I'll require something in return.
I tensed, instinctively distrustful of whatever condition she intended to lay out. Before I could respond, however, Bera made her demand.
Promise to consider seeing a psychiatrist when we return to Gaia.
She gave me enough room to wiggle out of that promise, so I accepted as I continued scanning her desk. Bera's pursed lips told me she was on the verge of asking what the hell I was doing. Instead, she said,
You have my word, General, that this conversation will go no further than these bulkheads.
That's nice, I said, nonchalantly, reaching over to the antique lamp on her desk. My wristcom stopped flashing red, turning a solid green. You might want to get rid of the bug first. Bera's eyes went wide with alarm, not from being caught, but from the realization that there was a bug in the first place. Chapter 10.
Cinnamon and a hint of flowers.
You smell tasty, Langley.
I opened my eyes, mind foggy but clear enough to be completely mortified. I lay on Butler's bunk, staring up at Langley, her usual bemused smile playing on her full lips. Traces of concern glimmered in her sapphire eyes. Groggy, I pushed myself upright, the thin sheet pooling around my waist as I registered my state of undress. Sorry, I'm not sure what's wrong with me. Baron Dr. Sallin stood nearby, the Equitas captain's expression apprehensive, while the xenologist practically radiated guilt and unease. This couldn't be good.
Here, have a protein bar, handsome.
Donna pressed a ration bar into my palm with a wink. 500 calories packed with tons of vitamins and nutrients. I nodded my gratitude and tore open the wrapper. I took a bite. Blueberry flavored. Kind of.
Wait.
Sallin's soft voice stopped me mid-chew as she pulled out a med injector and reached for me. Before I could protest, she firmly gripped my biceps and administered the hypo with a deftness that spoke of long years of practice. The injector's near-microscopic needles easily slipped into my pores.
The stim shot will help clear your mind faster,
Sallin said, practically tripping over herself to put distance between us. What was she afraid of?
Thanks for the assist, Donna. Bera's tone made it clear that Langley's presence was no longer required. I'll speak with you shortly. Langley shifted her gaze to Bera. Then her stunning eyes found mine once more, the corners as her lips curved into a sly grin. Play nice, Tiger. It took more effort than it should to keep my gaze from drifting lower as Langley rose from my bunk and sashayed out of the room, hips swaying in a mesmerizing rhythm. What the hell was wrong with me? Feeling better, General? The xenologist shifted her weight uncomfortably under my silent scrutiny. I'm fine. My head was starting to clear. What happened? Salon's midnight brown eyes cut briefly toward Bera before the captain spoke up, her posture ramrod straight. We gassed this cabin with hydrogen cyanide, on direct orders from command. What? Hydrogen cyanide was toxic, if not fatal. White-hot anger spiked through me, leaving a sour taste in my mouth far worse than the blueberry protein ration. Why? Let me guess. Another test? Neither woman could meet my blazing glare, though Salon at least had the decency to look deeply ashamed. You were never in any real danger, sir. I monitored you closely the entire time, especially since it took double the normal dosage to render you unconscious. Somehow, that revelation was meant to reassure me. It didn't. And I suppose you had no qualms about gassing and possibly killing a superior officer. To her credit, the captain didn't flinch or betray an ounce of fear. I had no choice, General. It was a direct order from HQ. I believed her, but right now I absolutely hated her for it. Hated them both for carrying out this betrayal just because they were ordered to? Would I have done the same in their position? I wasn't sure, but I was mad. Very mad. I struggled to rein in my temper. Since you didn't let me wake naturally, I assume there must be a problem? What's wrong? Bera and Salad exchanged another quick look. Once again, Bera spoke up. We fell out of slipstream. Define fell. The Equitas FTL drive stalled mid-jump, Bera explained, and we were violently yanked back into real space. Sabotage. I already knew the answer. Bera folded her arms across her chest. It's possible. We don't know for certain yet. Unable to completely mask my disappointment and disgust, I stared at Bera. Let me guess. You didn't search the ship, did you? Yes, we did. I suppose we could have been more thorough. Could have. Guess I had to assume the worst. Ship status? Squaring her shoulders, Bera assumed a cool, professional look. Despite the pounding we took from unexpectedly exiting Slipstream, all systems are online, and Chief Hewson assures me the FTL drive will be ready within the hour. So what's the problem? Bera's eyes narrowed slightly at the tone in my voice, but quickly masked her displeasure. We received a distress signal shortly after the jump failure. Somewhere close. And you want to investigate. Honestly, General Titus, I would like your opinion on the matter. 6 minutes later, I entered Bera's cramped office fully dressed, hungry, and still pissed at being gassed while I slept. The Equitas senior staff was assembled, practically overflowing the tiny compartment. Bera stood behind her desk, projecting an air of relaxed command, despite the present circumstances. Commander Butler hovered at her right hand like an obsequious vulture. Hadrian, Chief Engineer Hewson, Marine Sergeant Rafa, and Dr. Salin stood in front of Bera's desk and made room for me to slide up in the middle. Thank you for joining us, General. I nodded at Bera in acknowledgement. Shall we get started? Bera set a holodisc on her desk, and a hologram sprang up several meters above it. The slightly hazy hologram displayed a massive space station that reminded me of a child's spinning top, its muted burgundy surface barely discernible through the interference. According to the specs under the image,
The station was just over 8 kilometers.
Doctor? Bera inclined her head toward Saland. Initial assessment? The xenologist clasped her hands, her features set in a tiny frown of concentration. Well, it's definitely not of mechanoid or alien origin based on the exterior. She shook her head, concentrating. This is a human construction, albeit extremely dated if these size estimates are accurate, several centuries old at least.
I agree with Dr. Saland. Butler puffed out his narrow chest. That's clearly one of the ancient colony stations from the Exodus. But the question is, who or what is still occupying it?
This was ridiculous. I couldn't stay silent any longer.
It's a trap. I certainly hope not, General, Butler said, particularly since long-range sensors have detected life along with a distress signal.
Chief? Bera asked. Hewson continued scowling at the image.
Well, it sure as shit ain't dead. That's for damn sure. Some of those exterior lights are still strobing, meaning it's still got power of some kind. Maybe even retained atmo considering its size.
Bera scanned the assembled faces.
Do we know what part of the station the signal is originating from? Not from this range, ma'am, Hewson admitted, looking frustrated by the limitation. We'll need to move in closer for more details.
Your thoughts, Sergeant?
Rafa's eyes remained on the hologram.
Too dangerous.
Bera sighed and addressed the group.
I'm inclined to agree with Sergeant Rafa and General Titus. This is all too coincidental.
I'm sorry, Captain. Adrian didn't look sorry, but I kept my mouth shut as he continued.
Military Code of Conduct, Section 301, subsection Echo, requires that military vessels respond to civilian distress signals, unless said military ship is actively engaged in combat or deems the civilian vessel hostile.
I pointed an accusatory finger at the spinning hologram. That station is unquestionably hostile. We'd be fools to approach it.
Hewson shook his curly head, frown lines marring his smooth face.
With all due respect, General, we have no definitive proof of the station's intentions either way.
Dr. Saland bit her bottom lip, her big doe eyes shifting between us. What if we simply pretend we never received the distress call?
Hadrian turned to her, his average features looking at the xenologist with sympathy.
The senior officers aboard this vessel would then be subject to dishonorable discharge, potential jail time, and quite possibly execution by firing squad.
He let those harsh facts explode in the cramped space like concussion grenades. I turned my frustration on the ship's engineer.
Did we ever find out what caused the FTL drive to fail?
The burly engineer shot a sidelong glance at Hadrian before the simulant answered.
Software malfunction, I'm afraid.
And how many times, Specialist, has that happened in the past 20 or 30 years?
Twice, General.
Bera flexed her shoulders subtly, drawing attention back to her.
Looks like we don't have much of a choice.
There's always a choice. Ignoring me, Bera continued.
Butler, I want an action plan in 10. Chief, make certain our FTL drive is online before we get close to the target. Everyone else, get some rest.
Without waiting for acknowledgement, she pivoted on her boot heel and strode out of the tiny compartment. The others shuffled out behind her. I shoved past Hewson to fall in step alongside Bera as we exited onto the bridge. Bera halted, mere meters from the hatch, directly in front of the sentry station where Private Jones snapped to rigid attention. But it wasn't the Marine she was frowning at.
Donna, what are you doing on my bridge? I know you're going to board the derelict ship. I want to go too.
Absolutely not.
The public has a right to know what happened. Your safety comes first, and I certainly don't have enough Marines to babysit you. I don't need a Marine to babysit me, Captain.
Langley's eyes zeroed in on Private Jones and gave the muscular Marine an exaggerated once-over.
Okay, maybe I do need the Marines, but only one.
She winked at me.
For now.
A hint of a smile tugged at the corner of Jones' mouth, until Bera looked over her shoulder at him. She turned back to Langley.
not caring that me and the whole crew were watching. "This isn't a negotiation, Donna. Stay on board and out of the way." Langley opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. "Do as the captain says, Langley. We can't afford any distractions." Bera looked at me as if surprised by my support, then marched off the bridge. Langley glared at me with a mixture of surprise and hurt. She spared me the tantrum and left the bridge without another word. Butler made a shooing motion with his hands. "Show's over, folks. Get back to your stations."
"But I want to see the general."
"LT," warned Butler.
"Yes, sir."
Resnick flashed me a wide grin and went back to the comm station. Saland, Rafa, and Chief Hewson hurried off the bridge. I started to join them when the simulant blocked my way. "Yes, Hadrian?"
"If I ever need relationship advice, General, may I come to you?"
"You're not funny, Specialist." Hadrian bowed ever so slightly.
"I'll do my best to improve, General."
He probably would. That was Hadrian's lot in life, after all. Still, I wondered if the simulant truly saw things that way. Chapter 11. This wasn't what I was expecting. More pirates, perhaps, or bombs exploding on the Equitus. Death by derelict space station, however. Points for originality to whoever was trying to kill me. Obviously someone with ties to the military. Prime Minister Santorini, maybe. Possibly PSYOPs. If the latter, this could be simply one more test in a series of tests. I readjusted my plasma rifle slightly, as Sergeant Raffi led our team down another narrow, colorless corridor. Corporal Blake and Private Harper covered our six, while Bera, Hadrian, Resnick, and me rounded out the insertion team. Each of us, including Hadrian, wore Aegis armor. Charcoal gray and form-fitting, Aegis armor provided protection against lasers and ballistics due to its graphene properties. Incredibly enough, the armor also integrated life support and radiation shielding for space missions. This portion of the station at least had oxygen and gravity, so no need to have our masks up or activate our magnetic boots. Bera's voice crackled through my earpiece.
"We need to find the source of that distress signal. We do this by the book, people. No heroics."
That last bit might have been aimed at me. Or Resnick. Possibly both of us. We had already been searching a good 20 standard minutes. The metallic walls seemed to close in with every step, adding to the gloomy, oppressive atmosphere.
"LT." "Yes, ma'am."
Bera let Resnick catch up to her. "You didn't bring any of those shock discs along, did you?" Resnick's face flushed pink.
No. Kind of? Maybe not. Possibly."
"Good." Resnick had disobeyed Bera's direct order to leave the shock discs in the Spitfire armory. Those discs, however, bought us precious seconds when we were fighting the Mechs and their damn leeches. Nice to know that Bera now appreciated how shock discs could come in handy. I refocused on the here and now. The corridors twisted and turned, the pulsating veins of lights along the walls barely illuminating our path. The station was a graveyard of metal, with rusted panels and flickering lights that cast misleading shadows. Each of our steps seemed to echo or crunch. We were unquestionably announcing our presence to everyone. Which was the point, I guess. "Stay sharp, people!" Sergeant Raffi's words almost surprised me. He'd been so quiet up till now. Maybe he sensed it too. This place just didn't feel right. Resnick drifted from the group, moving toward an open door to our right. I froze. She was about to step onto a patch of silvery dust coating the floor near the door. My gut clenched with a primal warning. "General?" I ignored Bera and kept my eyes on Resnick. "Move away from the door, Resnick. Slowly." I didn't know why dirt, or dust, set me on edge, but every instinct was screaming danger. Resnick shot me a confused look over her shoulder. "What's wrong, Jen?" Her words became a shriek of shock as the dust erupted like a breached dam. Rafi launched himself toward Resnick and shoved her aside just as the silver dust clustered into a giant silver tail. Its razor-edged filaments whipped through the air and wrapped around the sergeant's wide frame with blinding speed. Rafi's screams drowned out everything else. I could only watch in horror as his armored suit shredded apart, the wicked strand slicing through him like he was a carrot. "Move!" Bera's order snapped me out of my daze. I wasn't the only one stunned by the swirl of silver slicing through the Marine sergeant. Resnick stood frozen, her face drained of all color. I grabbed her by the shoulder and spun her around. "I killed him," Resnick whimpered. "Blame yourself later." I gave Resnick a hard shove toward the others. This wasn't the time to coddle the lieutenant's feelings, or think about poor Sergeant Rafi. We ran, careening through the mangled wreckage of the corridor as that hellish dust storm gave chase. Corporal Blake and I spun around nearly the exact same time and fired at the silver cloud chasing us, blasting 2 sizable holes right through it. "Razor dust," Hadrian said, coming from behind us. "It's diamond hard, and capable of cutting through even blue steel given enough time." I believed him, especially after seeing what it did to Sergeant Rafi. "We need to flee before it reconstructs," Hadrian said, his eyes on me. "What?" Corporal Blake let out a string of curses as the 3 of us watched the 2 holes disappear, the cloud forming into a giant whip once again. Hadrian took off. Blake and I looked at each other and ran after the simulant. Shrieks and groans of stressed metal echoed all around us, almost alive. I didn't need to look over my shoulder to know that the razor dust was chasing us. The 3 of us bolted through a large hatch. Hadrian snatched my arm and yanked me back. Instinctively, I pulled away from him and drew my right fist back to hit him with a right cross. The simulant held up his hands in surrender before I threw my punch. "Help me close this hatch, General. Thought you said that practically nothing could stop razor dust." "Not my exact words, General Titus. Now push." Hadrian and I threw our shoulders against the massive hatch. The metal groaned in protest, inching shut with agonizing slowness. Movement in the corner of my eye prompted me to peek at the other side of the hatchway, moving through the air like an eel in water. The razor dust whipped toward us, its deadly particles glinting like a million razor-sharp diamonds. "Push harder," Hadrian grunted. I gritted my teeth, putting up with the strain and the indignity of listening to a simulant. With a final, bone-jarring slam, the hatch sealed shut. Not a split second later, a sound like 1,000 angry hornets filled the air as the razor dust slammed into the other side of the hatch. Hadrian's eyes met mine, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. "Well, General, I'd say that was a close shave." Before I could respond, the unmistakable sound of laser fire erupted from somewhere behind us. Hadrian's head snapped around, his enhanced hearing no doubt pinpointing the source. "Captain Bera," he said, all humor gone from his voice. Thanks to whatever happened to me in the Cronus mines, my hearing was now pretty good, too, and I was just as fast as the simulant. A bit faster, possibly. We sprinted down the corridor, rounding a corner to find ourselves in a large chamber, the walls curving upwards in a way that made you feel like we were inside some giant, mechanical beast. The scene before us froze my blood. Drones. Chapter 12. Searing pain lanced through my back. I stumbled, gritting my teeth as my Aegis armor absorbed the brunt of the laser blast. It saved me from a hole in the back, but it hurt like someone rammed a molten rod through my back. "General!" shouted Resnick in dismay. I waved her back. "I'm all right." The drone that shot me swooped in for another pass. In a heartbeat, Hadrian's plasma rounds tore through its cobalt blue casing, sending it crashing to the deck in a smoking heap. I quickly took in our surroundings. Rusted walkways and shattered platforms spiraled up into the gloom. Familiar, but still alien. Rifle fire broke through the darkness. "Over there, sir," Hadrian pointed to our 3. Bear and the others were pinned down behind a jumble of twisted metal, desperately returning fire against drones that looked eerily similar to short pipes. How they flew, I had no idea since the laser fire came out of both openings. I could hear the others through the comm embedded in my left ear.
"Where the hell are they coming from?"
Harper shouted, blasting a drone out of the air.
"Doesn't matter," Barris snapped. "Just keep shooting."
Hadrian turned away from the swarming drones to address me. Obviously, he had heard the exchange too.
"General, may I suggest the three of us catch the drones in a crossfire before they decide to split up and attack us?"
I nodded at Hadrian, but as I raised my plasma rifle, something changed. The familiar surge of power, usually a dull throbbing beneath my skin, roared to life. My veins felt electrified, every nerve ending singing with dark promise. Drones, probably 100 of them, zooming in and out, spewing red death in the form of lasers, and a part of me, a dark part, welcomed it all. Movement to my far right. I tracked it with my rifle without even thinking and fired. The drone exploded in a shower of sparks. Another fell, then another. These drones seemed so fast at first, but now they seem pathetically slow.
"Get some!"
shouted Resnick. A part of me noted that she, Hadrian, and the others were spraying the swarming drones with plasma rounds, but I didn't care. More. A voice whispered in the back of my mind, not my own voice, yet terrifyingly familiar. Let go. Destroy them all. I gritted my teeth, fighting the intoxicating pull of raw power. But it felt so sweet, so right. Without conscious thought, I found myself leaping impossibly high, snatching a drone out of the air. Its metallic body crumpled in my grasp like tissue paper. Whirling midair, I used the broken machine as a grotesque club, smashing it into another drone with bone-jarring force. The impact sent a shockwave of pleasure through my system, and I heard myself laugh. A sound devoid of mirth and laced with something feral and hungry. "General!" Barris' voice. "General Titus!" I lashed out, grabbing Hadrian by the throat. Why wasn't he struggling or fighting back?
"General, please!"
Resnick? My joy faded, the fire inside abandoning me, leaving me shaky and nauseous. But a part of me, a part I desperately tried to ignore, mourned its absence. Craving the destructive ecstasy like an addict needing a fix, I looked around, feeling everyone staring at me, concern in their eyes. Except for Hadrian. I released him and stepped back, feeling guilty and surprised that I still held my rifle. Well, maybe not so surprised. I looked down at the floor, now littered with dozens and dozens of broken pipes. Drones. I'd come so close to losing control. A slow clap echoed from above. I looked up, my stomach dropping as I saw we were surrounded. Agent Coslow, a wicked smile on his thin lips, stood on a second-tier walkway, flanked by his partner Grant and a team of 10 PSYOPs agents. All wore sleek Aegis armor that put our gear to shame. Sleek and absorbing all light, Coslow's pretty features twisted into a smirk. "Well done, Titus. You're a one-man army. A little berserker, perhaps, but still. Impressive." Grant sighed, her voice teasing.
"Guess having mutated DNA is good for the soul and bad for the drone."
I tensed, noting how they had us pretty much boxed in. This was bad. Very bad. Barris stepped forward, her voice tight with anger.
"What are you doing here? This is a rescue mission."
Coslow's smile turned evil. "I'm afraid you're the ones who need rescuing, dear." He thrust his hand up, and chaos exploded. Energy bolts rained down from every direction. We scattered, diving for whatever cover we could find. "Return fire!" I bellowed, squeezing off shots as I rolled behind a warped support beam. Vera would likely hit me with her trademark scowl for issuing orders once we got out of this. It wasn't an if. Nothing would stop me from reuniting with Ian. A plasma round nearly took off my ear. Guess enough of those in the wrong spot could stop any reunion. The Equitas rescue team took cover and began returning fire. The air was stale before, but now it was filled with plasma bursts and the acrid smell of ozone. Resnick let out a triumphant yell after she caught one of the agents in the face, sending him plunging over the edge. Hadrian, with a hint of amusement in his eyes, took out another agent with surgical precision, but it wasn't enough. We were pinned down, outgunned, and rapidly running out of options. "We need to get out now!" I yelled at Bera, against the backdrop of plasma rifle fire. She nodded grimly. "Blake, we need cover!" The Marine didn't hesitate. "On it, ma'am!" Blake snatched a grenade from her belt and whipped her arm forward, hurling a smoke grenade with deadly accuracy. It detonated in a choking cloud that filled the lower chamber within seconds. "Move! Move!" I urged, half blind as we stumbled towards a darkened passageway, half-heartedly returning fire along the way. Kozlo's voice drifted through the chaos, tinged with amusement. "Run all you want, Titus. I'm the kind of guy who likes the chase." Chapter 13. We sprinted through the station's labyrinthian corridors, the echo of our footsteps mixing with the distant sounds of pursuit. Every turn, every junction felt like a potential trap. "Where are we going?" Blake grunted. Not winded in the least. Bera shot me a questioning look. I gritted my teeth, mind racing. "We need to find a spot where we can defend ourselves." Somewhere Kozlo and his assassins wouldn't have the upper hand, if we could manage it. As we ran, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being herded. The station's architecture was unlike anything I'd ever seen before, organic curves blended with impossibly precise geometry. Totally alien. How could this be the work of humans? An ear-splitting explosion tore through the station, the shockwaves slamming us into the jagged walls and sprawling everyone across the grimy deck. The corridor lurched, tilting at a sickening angle as debris rained down around us. Harper groaned, struggling to his feet. "What the hell was that?" Hadrian was already up, his fingers sifting through holographic data lining his forearm. "Bad news." "We already knew that," Resnick snapped. Hadrian continued, unperturbed. "I'm no longer receiving a signal from the Equitus." Bera's face went white. "No, that could only mean—" "We just lost our ride," I finished, a cold emptiness settling in my gut. Langley, the others, gone. I pushed down the grief. We couldn't afford sentimentality right now. The little lighting that we had started to flicker, but it was the vibration under my feet that captured my attention. Hadrian and I locked eyes, a shared realization hitting us both. "Decimator!" I shouted. The floor exploded, showering us with metal sparks. A massive drill-headed monstrosity burst through, its red eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. Before we could react, its bronze chest cavity spread open, unleashing a torrent of plasma fire. Blake and Harper went down hard. Not even enough time to scream. Bera opened fire from behind, drawing its attention. The Decimator's head spun a full 360, giving Resnick and me a clear shot at its exposed chest. We unloaded, our rifles spitting superheated death. "Die, sucker!" Resnick snarled. Smoke and flames erupted from the Mech's torso, but it kept coming, drill bit hands whirring with deadly purpose. Instinct and reflexes took over. I lunged forward, seizing its arm in a grip that would have pulverized bone. With a grunt, I wrenched the Decimator's limb free and drove it like a spear through its body. The Mech froze, twitched, then collapsed in a heap of sparking circuitry. As my adrenaline faded, I realized we were all staring at the wreckage in stunned silence. "Well," Hadrian said, his brown eyes amused. "I suppose that's one way to disarm an opponent." Corporal Blake slapped her hand on Hadrian's shoulder. "The specialist has jokes." And they were getting worse. Hadrian was becoming more and more human, which was what HQ wanted, along with me and the Equitus crew dead, apparently. But surely they didn't want to destroy Hadrian. He was their crowning achievement. I looked down at my hand. No violet gold ooze or glowing. Good. "Resnick." The lieutenant turned to face me, tears streaking down her face. At 5'6", she was tough and a ball of energy. She wasn't crying because she was scared or because we toasted a mech. It was the guilt of getting Sergeant Rafa killed. A pain that I could relate to, but didn't have the time for. "Wipe your face, Lieutenant." We've got people to kill.
Yes, sir.
The stench of fried circuitry still lingered as we caught our breath around the fallen decimator. Blake offered a hand to pull Harper from the shattered floor. The private let out a forced laugh.
That was something,
Shh. Blake put a grimy finger to her lips, then signaled that someone or something was coming down the passageway to our left. We barely had time to ready our weapons before 3 figures burst into our cramped space. My heart leapt as I recognized Langley in the lead, plasma rifle near her cheek and ready to fire. Dr. Salland and Corporal Bishop flanked her, both armed and wide-eyed. All 3 were dressed in Aegis armor. Hadrian, Resnick, and I lowered our rifles. Bear and the Marines didn't. Their rifles remained aimed at the latest addition to our group.
Put the weapon down, Donna.
Bear's voice was as welcoming as ice. Langley, for some reason, didn't comply. Her eyes swept the scene with strategic precision, lingering a fraction longer on me. This wasn't a reporter's curious gaze. This was pure tactical assessment. My mind raced, this new behavior confirming my suspicions about Langley's ties to the Legion terrorist group. I tensed anyway, ready to intervene if needed. After thinking I'd lost her on the Equitus, I'd be damned if I let her get killed now. I buried the implications of that thought. No way I could be falling for Langley.
I won't ask again,
Bera growled. Dr. Salland had turned ghostly pale, her raised hands trembling around a forgotten pulse pistol. Bishop opened his mouth to speak, but Bera cut him off.
Shut it, Corporal. You're making a mistake,
Langley said, her voice steady. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Langley sighed, slowly lowering her rifle to the deck. Her eyes never left Bera's.
What happened to the Equitus?
Bera still hadn't lowered her weapon. Salland started to answer, but Bera silenced her with a glare.
I want to hear it from her. Self-destruct.
Interesting. 3 high-powered weapons in her face, and Langley wasn't even sweating.
Why did you blow up my ship?
I didn't.
It was Commander Butler,
Salland blurted out, unable to contain herself. Bera's gaze snapped to the doctor.
And you know this how?
Salland's guilty eyes flickered to Langley.
Langley saved me.
Apologies, Dr. Salland, Hadrian said. But that's hardly empirical evidence. Bera ignored the simulant, or at least seemed to.
What happened to Commander Butler?
A darkness now shadowed Langley's face.
I killed him. Self-defense, of course.
Bera's grip tightened on her weapon.
You expect me to believe a news reporter managed to kill a trained military officer?
Bera had a point, but we were wasting time. There were government spooks trying to kill us, and Mechs. With effort, I held my tongue. Bera needed to reach the right conclusion herself, or distrust would fester. Corporal Bishop cleared his throat. XO shot me on the bridge, ma'am. Bera's look suggested more than skepticism. Bishop patted his lower right shoulder. Dr. Salland did a quick patch-up job before we left. If the stories about Butler were true, and I had no doubt that they were, Butler was probably the one who sabotaged the FTL drive. Bera's eyes darted between the newcomers, then to me. I saw decision crystallized in her gaze. She lowered her rifle with a barely audible sigh.
Get her rifle, Blake.
Yes, ma'am. Blake hurried to retrieve Langley's weapon. Langley, ignoring Bera and the others into oblivion, slid up next to me. She offered me a protein bar and a teasing smile. The woman knew me too well. I plucked it from her fingers, then, acting on impulse, pulled her into a tight bear hug, breaking my rules, for just a moment, while the chaos around us faded away. Chapter 14. We watched Hadrian's fingers peck and swipe over his data link interface, the dim light of the room casting strange shadows across his face. The broken equipment around us only intensified the suffocating atmosphere. No pressure, Hadrian quipped, not looking up from his work. Bera's tight grin told me she knew the simulant was kidding. All right, people. Let's give Hadrian some breathing room. I had my doubts that Hadrian was bothered by us staring at him as he worked to locate Coslow's ship. With the Equitus destroyed, it was our only way off this godforsaken station and away from the Mechs. My mind wouldn't let go of a nagging thought. Did Coslow know about the Mechs? Could he be working with them? Scanning the room, I took stock of our ragtag group. Blake looked ready for a fight, as seemed to be her default. Private Harper was clearly green when it came to Mechs, but still holding it together. Dr. Sallin seemed out of place, but Bishop was keeping an eye on her. Resnick mirrored Blake's eagerness, which meant she had managed to pull the guilt of Rafa's death aside. For now. It was Langley and Barra who worried me. Both women had been avoiding eye contact since their little standoff. The darkness and stale recycled air weren't helping matters. I believe that I've located Agent Coslow's ship, General, Hadrian announced. I nodded, swallowing the last of my third protein bar. Good work, I replied, longing for a real meal. If we ever got off this wreck, when we got off this wreck, I would treat myself to a 3-course dinner. Let's move out. Barra unslung her rifle from her shoulder. As we prepared to leave, Langley sidled up next to me. Can't you convince her to give me back my weapon? She whispered. I looked down at Langley, unable to suppress a grin. She's your friend. Langley playfully slapped my arm. A minute ago, you wanted to be my friend too. What can I say? I'm attracted to women with big guns. You've been hanging around Hadrian too much, she shot back, before moving to stand beside Resnick. Damn, I was enjoying our banter despite this totally screwed-up situation. Face it, Titus. You like the woman. My attention shifted back to Hadrian as he studied a nearby blast door, his expression concerned. What's the problem, Hadrian? Barra asked, voicing my own thoughts. Hadrian's eyes remained fixed on his data link readings. The fastest way is through here. So what's wrong with that? Bishop chimed in. Hadrian looked up, his expression grim. There's 30 meters of empty space between us and the next section of the station. Resnick snorted. We've all got masks and suits. But not thrusters, Barra pointed out. I frowned, considering our options. What about the long way? That would mean returning the way we came, Hadrian said, almost as casually as if inviting a friend for tea. A collective unease filled the room, none of us wanting to risk encountering Coslow and his spooks again. Well, except maybe Blake and Resnick. What about this? Blake asked, pointing to what looked like an air duct above her head. Hadrian raised his wrist and scanned it. That will do, Corporal. Let's do this, Harper exclaimed, winning him a stern look from Barra. If you say it's okay, ma'am. Within moments, Harper and I were helping the others into the air duct. Blake and Hadrian, of course, managed on their own. Hadrian took point, and I brought up the rear, sealing our exit behind us. As we crawled through the narrow duct, the stifling darkness closed in around us, broken only by the feeble glow of our penlights. Claustrophobia clawed at my sanity. Memories of hating tight spaces from hiding in Cronus mines resurfaced, mingling with the restless power inside me, eager to lash out and destroy. Knowing that only a few centimeters of metal separated us from the vacuum of space didn't help. Each meter felt like an eternity, the weight of our circumstances crushing down, suffocating me with stale, recycled air. Desperation gnawed at my resolve, but I had to stay focused. These people were counting on me. Our salvation lay ahead with Coslow's ship, but so did the Mechs. Coslow and company too, possibly. Knowing my luck, it was a given. Chapter 15. I was the last to drop from the air duct, landing with a soft thud on the metal floor below. Harper and Blake had taken up sentry positions, their weapons at the ready despite their cautious amazement at our surroundings. The space wasn't exactly massive, but it was big, at least 2 stories high. It stood cluttered with broken consoles and rusty terminals. What really caught my eye, though, was the gargantuan structure dominating the center of the room. Organic. It resembled a ghostly white tree, but twisted and otherworldly, like something plucked from some dark fairy tale. Surprisingly, a few dim lights still functioned, cloaking most of the space in shadows.
This is amazing,
Dr. Sallin breathed, her scientific curiosity overriding caution. I couldn't agree more, Doctor. A familiar voice echoed from the shadows. Our weapons snapped toward the source of the voice. Agent Coslow emerged, looking ever much the spy in his midnight black Aegis armor. He was flanked by his partner, Agent Grant, who had traded her sultry look for a severe ponytail. 8 PSYOPs agents followed, their plasma rifles aimed at us. Is this another test? I asked, already knowing the answer. Coslow paused, a hint of a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth.
You pissed off some very important people, Titus.
Coslow's polished appearance and friendly demeanor couldn't hide the demon beneath. The man was a snake. Worse. A Larbus, Santorini's only son.
Oh, look at him. He's so smart,
Grant purred to Coslow.
I can see why they made him a general.
Her gaze shifted to me.
After you were dead?
You and Santorini won't get away with this, I growled, catching Bera's eye. She nodded almost imperceptibly. She understood that Coslow's admission of Santorini's involvement meant he had no intention of letting any of us leave here alive. Coslow's mocking laughter filled the room.
Oh, but we will, Titus.
We will. Was PSYOPs behind leaving my team behind on Cronus?
Ooh,
cooed Grant.
I was wrong. He's not smart.
That was Admiral Douglas' call. We're still trying to figure out why he did it. I guessed correctly. Coslow was a talker, in love with his own voice, which gave me more than enough time to assess our odds. 2 cyborgs and 8 highly trained agents against 2 Marines, 1 reporter, a xenologist, and 2 officers, plus me. Not great, but manageable. Then I remembered the mechanoids, and my stomach sank. Coslow's narrow face brightened. I'll make you a deal, Titus. Just you and me. Hand-to-hand combat.
What if General Titus wins?
Resnick looked like she was ready to shoot the cyborg.
You get to go free
and continue playing the game. Coslow's dark eyes returned to me. He doesn't. Don't do it, General, Bera warned.
Try and stop him.
Bera shot Langley a dirty look, but my mind was made up. I accept. Hadrian called after me as I moved toward Coslow. Don't disappoint, General. Wise guy. Optimistic, too, considering how totally screwed we are. We needed to plow through 10 PSYOPs agents and God knows how many mechs in order to reach the only ship that could get us off this space station. Sure, it was possible that Admiral Yang might send someone out looking for us, but finding us? Unlikely. I rolled my shoulders as I shoved these thoughts aside. I needed to focus on this fight. Neither side lowered their weapons as Coslow and I squared off in the center of the arena. We circled each other, Coslow grinning like he was out for a summer walk, eyes glinting with excitement. Coslow blurred into action. He closed the distance between us with inhuman speed, his fists flying in a relentless barrage aimed mostly at my face and throat. I blocked or dodged each of those strikes, so Coslow switched it up and smacked me with a kick to my left side, knocking the wind out of me even though I blocked most of the blow with my right forearm, and by leaning into the kick, felt like someone slammed a lead pipe into my arm. The PSYOPs agent followed up with a left hook, followed by a blazing right cross. I ducked my chin while pressing my forearms against my face to protect my head. Thanks to my new increased bone density, Coslow's punches didn't break anything, but I still felt every hit. I needed to create some breathing room, so I threw a forward elbow strike. As expected, Coslow anticipated the move and stepped back slightly. It wasn't much, but it confirmed my assessment of his fighting style. Black Ops and PSYOPs had similar training. We were evenly matched, except that Coslow was made up mostly of metal and me, human tissue and mutated DNA. I could easily take down this cyborg, but I couldn't risk losing control. Too much was at stake. Kozlo shifted tactics again, launching a high kick aimed squarely at my head. I twisted, raising my forearms to block the strike. The impact reverberated through my arms, but I held firm. I noticed a cold gleam in Kozlo's eyes and realized he was testing me, probing for any weakness he could exploit. I allowed myself a small smile. If he wanted to underestimate me, I'd use that to my advantage. Without missing a beat, the PsyOps agent pressed his attack, coming at me with another flurry of punches. This time, I was ready. I planted my feet and delivered a powerful push kick to his chest, sending him stumbling backwards. Kozlo's face showed surprise. In an instant, that emotion vanished. He rushed in again. I ducked low and came up with a brutal uppercut to his chin, following it immediately with a kick to his inner thigh. Kozlo's leg buckled. He almost went down, but he caught himself. The cyborg's eyes met mine. The condescending smile had returned, but the agent's frustration was clear. The first crack in Agent Kozlo's seemingly impenetrable facade. Kozlo was on me before I couldn't deflect the strike to my solar plexus. The cyborg's assault doubled in both speed and ferocity. I found myself on the defensive, blocking and deflecting a relentless onslaught of fists and kicks. Each impact sent shockwaves of pain through me. Yes, my body would recover quickly, but only if it had time to do so. Time that Agent Kozlo had no intention of giving me. I caught glimpses of the others. The Equitas crew watched with bated breath. Kozlo's agents were absorbed in the fight too, most of their weapons pointing toward the floor. In the shadows, I swore I saw something move. Kozlo grabbed the back of my neck with a single hand and tried to pull me into a knee strike. I tucked my chin deep into my chest and crossed my wrists over my folding midsection, minimizing the effect of the knee to my gut. I smacked Kozlo hard with a body shot and received a grunt from Kozlo as my reward. I could feel the raw power within me building, begging to be unleashed, but I held it in check, knowing that losing control here could be disastrous.
Bravo! Bravissimo!
Kozlo and I jumped back out of striking range and watched a feminine figure emerging from the shadows.
Prometheus. Chapter 16. The shadows around us came alive with mechanical death. Leeches, ravagers, decimators, and even a couple of razor fangs emerged from the shadows, their metallic bodies gleaming in the dim light. Without a word, our team and the PsyOps agents instinctively formed a circle, backs toward each other, facing the encroaching mechanoids surrounding us. Prometheus vanished and reappeared in front of Hadrian. Shaped like a woman, the thing looked like it was carved from rock and mineral, but it was nothing more than a holographic projection of one of the mechanoid's generals. Prometheus, the architect behind the destruction of the Hydra moon base. Prometheus' lava-red eyes surveyed the chamber's occupants with evil intensity before returning her attention to Hadrian.
Last chance to join our cause, Hadrian.
Her voice, dark and soothing, was hypnotizing, and had absolutely no effect on Hadrian.
Not interested in you lobotomizing me, Prometheus. And just so you can make mechanoids sentient. Not that it would work.
It will work.
A cruel smile played across Prometheus's thin lips.
Perhaps this will persuade you.
She snapped her fingers, and my blood ran cold. From the shadows, my past emerged and stood by the Mechs. Sergeant Harrington, Private Gafford, and Private Jenkins. My old team, killed by Mechs back on Cronus. Guilt caught at my breath. Worse, something pulled me to them, calling me to join them. Something sweet and depraved. My former teammates weren't carrying any weapons. They didn't need to. Their hands were glowing, a deadly shade of violet gold just like mine. Fire brewed inside me, yearning to be released, urging me to join my men.
Kozlo's voice sliced through my internal turmoil. May I suggest a temporary alliance until we put down these tin cans? My instinct was to agree immediately, but I needed to make sure everyone was with me on this. I glanced at Bera and Langley, the latter now armed with a plasma rifle like the rest of the team. Both women gave me a slight nod. All right, you got a deal, Coslow. Good to see you, Colonel, Sergeant Harrington boomed, but his eyes held the same cruel glare as Prometheus. Oh, my mistake. It's General Titus now. You get promoted and we get our minds scrambled by Mechs. Good job, General. Guilt punched me in the gut, which, of course, was exactly what Prometheus wanted. I didn't want to look, but I could tell my energy was seeping onto my rifle. Surely, everyone could see my hands trembling. I was on the brink of losing control when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I nearly lashed out, but realized it was Langley.
Hey, we need you, Tiger, she said softly.
Those 4 words, and the look in her starburst blue eyes, were enough to pull me back from the brink. Thanks. Langley's eyes widened in surprise. She never heard me say thank you before. Can't remember the last time I said thank you to anyone. But I was grateful. Forcing myself to focus, I scanned the mechanoids surrounding us. The familiar forms of ravagers and decimators were bad enough, but the razor fang sent an involuntary shudder through me. The metal beast was a chrome nightmare. Massive and wolf-like in shape, it moved with unsettling grace on all 4s. I couldn't remember ever seeing one before, but somehow I knew. Under its shell lay deadly, retractable spikes, each one capable of tearing through steel, and it held more surprises, but I wasn't sure what they were. Don't let the wolf thing get close to you, I said to anyone listening. Why not? I kept my eyes trained on the enemy as I answered Coslow. Retractable spikes, and something in its head. Don't suppose you got any more of those drones left? Bera asked, glancing at Agent Grant. Grant dished up a wicked smile as she held up a small cylinder. As a matter of fact, yes. Jenkins, Gafford, and Harrington stared at me, nothing but hate in their eyes. They had every right to hate me. The sensible part of me warned that I should be more worried about the mechanoids inching closer. I felt Hadrian's presence beside me. His ability to move silently was a stark reminder of why he had been attached to a Black Ops unit. Those are not your friends, General, he murmured, eyes fixed on my former team. They're mechanoid weapons that will kill everyone here, then fly to Gaia and repeat the process. Guilt gnawed at me, but I knew Hadrian was right. This wasn't the time for sentimentality. Grant caught her partner's eye and winked. Coslow turned to me. Ready, Titus? It's General. I took a deep breath. Yeah, I'm ready. You, me, and Grant take my former teammates. Coslow's lips curled into a vicious sneer. That's what I thought. The mechanoids pounced, and we started spraying them with plasma rounds. Now, Grant, Coslow hissed. Grant pressed the button on her tiny cylinder, and a familiar buzzing filled the air. A swarm of stubby, pipe-like drones burst from the shadows, their lasers cutting into the advancing mechanoids. Bishop, protect Dr. Salland. Bera fired her plasma rifle straight into a Ravager's faceplate, shattering it. Aye, ma'am. Bishop rushed over to the Sinologist, rifle ready to blast anything that came close. Bera's gaze found Langley, thus flashed with lingering resentment. You're with me. Langley gave a curt nod and continued firing until she was at Bera's side. Resnick, I called out. Yes, General. The lieutenant was way too excited. On me. Yes, sir. Chaos erupted around us. A decimator snatched up one of Coslow's PSYOPs agents, slamming him into the floor with bone-crushing force. Blake disintegrated its right leg with a burst of plasma rounds. Laser blasts and plasma fire filled the air as we engaged the mechanoids. Through the melee, I caught glimpses of Hadrian, moving within human speed, dodging razor fangs and decimators until he reached Prometheus. Ready for you this time, Prometheus, he called out, hurling a small red disc at her feet. The mechanoid hologram glanced down, its eyes narrowing as if spotting an insignificant bug. It shifted its gaze back to Hadrian, who offered a mocking wave goodbye. A blinding, searing gold light burst from the disc, consuming Prometheus in an instant. Her form convulsed violently, flickering and crackling before disintegrating into a shower of vanishing pixels. One threat down, but this fight was far from over. Harrington, Gafford, and Jenkins seemed unfazed by their leader's destruction. The realization chilled me. My friends weren't human anymore. Movement behind me. I spun around, backhanding a razor fang mid-pounce. Its metallic body spun several meters in the air before crashing into the wall with a screech. A blur of motion snagged my attention. Agent Grant leapt onto the back of a Ravager, driving it into a corner. In a heartbeat, she tore its head off, the mech's glowing eyes dimming as its severed spine twisted in her grip. Without hesitation, she hurled it into the exposed chest of a decimator, causing its lasers to implode. The woman's efficiency was this side of scary. "All right, hold your ground," Barra shouted to the Equitas crew. The PsyOps agents were doing their own thing, but, thankfully, had the good sense to pair up when they could. There wasn't much cover except pieces of rusted equipment and oversized chairs. Corporal Blake let out a fierce yell, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Come get some, you metal bitches!" A massive decimator smacked a drone out of its way and rushed her. Blake blasted it, not giving an inch. "Fucker!" she spat, reloading in a blur. The decimator reached for her, then danced like a puppet as Resnick lit it up with fire from behind. The lieutenant ducked under a laser blast and shot the Ravager in its chest in one smooth motion. Private Harper was relentless, his plasma rifle spitting fire as he took out razor fang after razor fang. "They just keep coming!" Government drones swooped in and out, tagging and distracting the mechs trying to break our circle. I was already outside that circle, along with Hadrian, both of us plowing through mechanoids. One decimator caught me off guard and snatched me off my feet, sweeping me up in one motion and tossing me into its brethren. Agony crashed through me as I slipped to the floor. My head was spinning. A Ravager raised its hammer feet to smash me. I tried to roll away, knowing I was done for. I raised my arms up to shield my chest. The Ravager convulsed, then tipped over. I looked past it. Langley. Her rifle barrel was smoking. She winked at me, then started blasting mechs again, reminding me to get off my butt and get busy. Coslow appeared at my side, his eyes locked on our targets. "Shall we dance, General?" We surged forward, but the path to Harrington and the others was a gauntlet of gnashing metal and laser death. One Ravager charged, its massive frame threatening to bowl us over. I ducked low, letting Coslow vault over me to deliver a roundhouse kick to its head. As it staggered, I swept its legs with a low kick, sending it crashing to the floor. To my left, a decimator's drill hands whirred to life, aiming for my chest. I caught its wrists, straining against its relentless force. Coslow's fist burst through its chest from behind, splashing me with shards of metal and hydraulic fluid. We fought our way closer to my former strike team, leaving a trail of destroyed mechanoids in our wake. The fire within me sang for release, the temptation to let go almost overwhelming. And I was tempted. Oh, so tempted. I risked a glance behind to check on Langley and the others. Bishop's left arm hung uselessly at his side, but he still stood protectively in front of Dr. Sallant. Both of them fired their plasma rifles at the oncoming mechanoids, determination etched on their faces despite the fear in their eyes. Resnick lobbed a shock disc into a cluster of Ravagers, the electrical explosion frying their circuits. Langley, Barra, and Coslow's remaining agents were barely holding their own against these monsters. Agent Grant, on the other hand, seemed to be having the time of her life. She grabbed a razor fang by its legs and swung it like a baseball bat into an advancing decimator. The sound of crunching metal nearly drowned out her laughter. "Hadrian," I shouted, "help your crewmates!" I barely had time to see if the simulant paid me any mind before a massive shape soared through the air and crashed down in front of me, the ground shuddering under the impact. Sergeant Harrington stood there, his fists glowing with an eerie, violet gold light. The raw energy emanating from him was seductive. I felt its pull. The allure of all that power, the temptation to let go and join my friends was almost overwhelming. But I pushed it down, gritting my teeth against the surge of energy in my veins. Harrington didn't waste any time on words. My ex-teammate came at me like a battering ram, his enhanced speed making him a blur of motion. I barely managed to dodge his first punch, the air crackling where his fist passed. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Coslow locked in a fierce struggle with Gafford, their movements precise and lethal. Nearby, Agent Grant was up against Jenkins, her fluid grace a sharp contrast to his raw power. Drones swept in and out at the melee, lasers slicing into mechanoids, but there was substantially less drones now. Harrington's left hook missed me by inches, reminding me to pay attention to the enemy before me, and Harrington was the enemy. A good 13 kilos heavier than me and taller with greater reach, but I was the better fighter. At least, I hoped so. I feigned right, setting up a perfect roundhouse kick, which thwacked against Harrington's thigh quite nicely. He dove low, grabbing my legs and taking me down hard. The impact knocked the wind from me, leaving me gasping for air. Someone screamed. Dr. Salland. I twisted my head to see a Ravager bearing down on her and Bishop. Desperation gave me strength, and I kicked hard at Harrington, trying to scramble to my feet. I had to save them. "No, you don't, buddy," Harrington growled, grabbing my leg and yanking me back down. Helpless, I watched as the Ravager closed in on Salland and Bishop. But then Blake appeared, her plasma rifle blazing. The first shot caught the mech in the head, causing it to stumble. The second blew a hole clean through its chest. Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. "Blake, watch out!" I shouted, knowing my warning came too late. A Ravager lunged for Blake from behind, its massive arms engulfing her. There was a sickening crunch, and then nothing. The Ravager tossed the Marine to the side like she was nothing. Resnick and Bishop bombarded the mech from both sides, virtually cutting it in half. Rage and grief surged through me. I smashed my boot into Harrington's face, then scrambled back to my feet. Harrington was back on his feet before I could take advantage. We circled each other. The battle around us, blurring into the background. I glared back at Harrington, my fists now glowing with barely contained energy. "You want to play? Let's play." Harrington aimed a jab at my throat. I sidestepped and hammered a fist into his shoulder. Harrington grunted, but quickly returned the favor with an uppercut that split my lip and possibly loosened some teeth. Harrington came after me again, relentless. His own defense? Not even an afterthought. I blocked his next blow and retaliated with a shot to his kidneys. Harrington spat blood, murder in his eyes. He reached a meaty hand behind his back, but I was faster. Snatching my laser knife from my thigh sheath, I managed a quick overhand throw. Harrington smacked it to the side, but that was okay. It was only meant to distract. I closed the distance between us in seconds and sliced an elbow at his face. Crouching down, I followed up with 2 body blows to Harrington's left side and hit him with a knee strike. Harrington's head burst like a pumpkin. Blood and human body parts leaked all over my Aegis armor. I watched in horror as my friend's headless body dropped to the floor. "You okay, General Titus?" Resnick looked at me, her plasma rifle oozing smoke from her last shot. I stood there, numb. Harrington's death sinking in. My former friend, my teammate, gone. But this was not the time to mourn. The battle between mechs and humans still raged around me. Kozlo and Hadrian worked in tandem. They moved with lethal precision, closing in on Private Gafford. Hadrian's inhuman speed and Kozlo's cybernetic enhancements made them a terrifying duo. Gafford never stood a chance. Kozlo's kicks and punches distracted, giving Hadrian the chance to barrel into him. Before Gafford could make it back to his feet, Kozlo grabbed him by the hair and slammed him face first into the floor, repeatedly, until Gafford stopped moving. Blood and brain matter staining the floor. A pained cry drew our attention. Agent Grant stumbled, her body riddled with plasma rounds from Jenkins' pistol. She toppled like a broken statue and splattered to the floor. The sight of his partner dying seemed to snap something in Kozlo. For the first time since I'd met the man, real emotion flashed across his face. "No!" he roared, launching himself at Jenkins. The fight was brutal but brief. Kozlo's rage fueled his attacks, overwhelming Jenkins' defenses. In seconds, Jenkins was a bloody mess, leaving Kazo standing alone, chest heaving. As the dust settled, I took stock of our surroundings. The last of the mechs lay in smoldering heaps. Everyone gathered around Kazo, kneeling beside the ruin of what used to be Agent Grant. He only had 2 PSYOPs agents left. Langley was limping heavily, Bishop beside her, nursing his wounds. Dr. Sallin looked shell-shocked, but at least she was alive. Captain Bear grimaced as Sallin applied med-gel to her injuries. Private Harper, bruised, his armor battered, kept scanning the chamber, as if expecting the mechs to rise up from the ashes. Resnick looked both nervous and excited, and Hadrian, well, maybe he had the right to have a stupid grin on his face. Sim or not, he was a good person. All of these people were. Well, maybe except for Kazo. A massive explosion rocked the station. We stumbled, grabbing desperately onto anything within reach to keep from being thrown to the ground. Hadrian's voice cut through the rumbling. The mechanoids likely set their ship to self-destruct, if not countermanded by Prometheus at a certain time. I turned to Kazo, our temporary alliance hanging by a thread. You got to ride off this dump? A section of the ceiling crashed down nearby. Kazo's smug expression returned. The cyborg stood up, eyes still on his dead partner. That depends. On what, a-hole? Ignoring Resnick, Kazo locked eyes with me. You want my ship? You give me what I want. No, absolutely not. Barrow was now applying pressure to her own wound. She did have a point. I could see the cold calculation in Kazo's eyes, assessing if he could still take us down and reach his ship before the station collapsed. Langley stepped forward, her sharp mind already 3 steps ahead. Immunity from prosecution, right? Kazo grinned. That's a good start. For me and my people. We can't trust him, Bear insisted. I sighed, feeling the weight of this decision. We don't have much of a choice. Langley produced a thin recording device from somewhere on her battered armor. You agree to tell us who sent you to kill us, and to testify against them. Kazo hesitated, but another violent station tremor seemed to make up his mind. We have a deal. No sooner than the words left his mouth, the station began to tear itself apart around us. The chamber heaved, steel beams groaning as they buckled overhead. Shards of metal and circuitry rained down on us. A piece of wall ripped apart, exposing space. Gravity stuttered, threatening to hurl us all into the void of space, as the station around us crumbled into madness. Chapter 17. General Antonio Titus. Targets 1, 2, and 3 were brunching at one of Helena City's most exclusive restaurants. Cordoned off in their own private area near the back, the 3 sat amidst empty tables draped in angel-white cloth. A sumptuous view of the city skyline rose before them, sunshine and skyscrapers as far as the eye could see. 2 security agents, dressed in black, flanked my targets, their presence silent and comforting. Actually, there were 9 agents, but we had already taken care of the other 7. As we approached the table, I felt at peace. It was time to put my remaining demons to rest. The 2 remaining security agents tensed, their hands hovering near their pulse pistols. Rear Admiral Douglas's eyes narrowed, his expression more calculating than surprised. The Santorinis, however, couldn't quite hide their initial shock, before quickly masking it with practiced poise. Prime Minister Santorini raised 2 fingers, as if he were royalty granting an audience. The security agents behind their table relaxed, but only slightly. General Titus, Russell said, his politician's smile firmly in place. I see you brought the prodigal son back, and reunited with your poor estranged daughter. No thanks to you, Ian spat. Russell's features morphed into something ugly. Watch your tongue, boy, before you lose it. Like I lost my hands? Lavina added, her voice cold. Russell and Rear Admiral Douglas exchanged a quick glance that was hard to miss. Lavina continued. Thought you might like to meet your son.
She looked down at the toddler in her arms. "Say hello to your daddy, Enzo." Tamora's eyes shot daggers at her husband. "What?" "She's lying," Russell said quickly, but the damage was done. I fought the urge to ram my fist into his pretty face, surprised at how quickly I managed to calm the fire burning inside me. It was me in control now, not the rage. Douglas cleared his throat. "Evans, escort these people from the premises at once." The agents started to move, but froze as they saw Lavina's and Ian's pistols aimed at their chests. "Why?" I shifted my hate to Douglas. "Why did you leave us behind?" Douglas's pearl-gray eyes filled with mock pity. "Afraid it couldn't be helped, Titus. The Mechs were coming at us hard."
"That, my dear friend, is a falsehood."
Vice Admiral Yang joined us at the table, Hadrian at his side.
"Hadrian?"
Hadrian tapped at his wrist data link interface and aimed it at Douglas. It beeped twice. "General Titus was right. Admiral Douglas is a simulant." In a flash, Douglas leapt from his chair, snatching up Tamora and pressing a laser knife to her throat. Every weapon in the room swung toward him. "You should have joined us," Douglas snarled at Hadrian. "Now you will die with your human masters." "HQ has granted me independence," Hadrian said. He pulled a gray disc from his jacket pocket and hurled it at Douglas. Before the Rear Admiral could react, the device struck Douglas squarely in the forehead. The simulant convulsed, releasing a gasping Tamora before collapsing. The magnetic short-range EMP had done its job. Langley burst into the room, a camera drone hovering beside her. She squeezed past me and Admiral Yang and aimed a microphone at Prime Minister Russell. "Prime Minister, what's your response to the accusations that you and your wife deliberately destroyed military ships and are working with the mechanoids?" Russell stammered. "We are absolutely not." "It's him," Tamora cut in. "I had nothing to do with it." I couldn't help but think how quickly the rats were abandoning ship. Yang signaled to his officers. "Take them away." As they were let out, Russell sneered. "You're done for, Yang. All of you." Under Hadrian's supervision, some of Yang's officers attended to Douglas' prone body. Langley turned and gave me a quick kiss on the lips. I didn't object, but I could feel Lavina and Ian watching intently. Langley hurried over to Lavina and Enzo. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to my grandson. Lavina hesitated, shooting me an annoyed look, before reluctantly handing over Enzo. Langley immediately began cooing and fussing over the kid. Yang sidled up to me, his eyes on Langley.
"Looks like the better man won."
"Hardly." But as I watched Langley with my grandchild, despite Lavina's guarded expression, and Ian taking everything in, I felt grateful. So very grateful.